Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku, Shinso and Eri kidnapped Eraserhead. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. It was an old gas station in the older part of Musutafu. The windows were broken and the paint peeled shreds through sprayed-on graffiti. Inside, weeds peeked up out of the concrete, growing around dusty knocked-over shelves. It was abandoned, forgotten. But behind the trash, tucked towards the back, voices whispered. "She's getting worse." A voice said, young and subdued. "She keeps tossing and turning and can barely get out of bed anymore for food or water." The voice paused. "Maybe I can try to calm her down." "No, Deku." A new voice. It was older and more masculine. Exhaustion could be heard in every syllable as if they were trying by willpower alone to stay awake. "You've already been rewound too many years. It isn't safe." The younger voice, Deku, cried, "But we can't just do nothing. She needs help. She needs us." "That may be, but until we can get her to turn off her quirk there is nothing we can do." Deku mumbled to himself. He was quiet but the phrase, "turn off her quirk," could be heard. "Deku! Stop!" The older voice cut through the mumbles. It was angry. "Stop looking like that." "Like what?" "Like you're about to do something incredibly stupid that's going to get you killed." Deku pouted, hurt. "I don't look like that." "Oh, my apologies. I forgot, that's your default state of being," the older voice snarked. "That's not very nice." A loud sigh. "Look, we've already got one sick, hurt kid. We don't need another." "But you said that we can't do anything until she gets her quirk back under control." "Yes, but we've tried everything. My quirk isn't working on her and you don't have one." Silence echoed. I'm sorry. That was harsh. I just don't want to see you dash." "I know someone," Deku interrupted. "What?" "I know someone who could turn off her quirk." "Why, you please don't tell me you're thinking what I am afraid you are thinking." "High schools start in about an hour. If we hurry we could catch him on his way to dash." "No." "But I dash." "No." "Toshi, it's dash." "No, Deku." "No. He's a pro hero." "I don't care. I'm not going to abandon her. She needs us. And I can't think of any other solution. Please, Toshi. Just trust me on this." There was a long angry silence. "Fine." Deku breathed. "Thank you. Thank you, Toshi." The sky was obnoxiously bright, forcing Aizawa to bury his head into his capture weapon. He had managed to get a solid 3 hours of sleep after his shift had ended last night, but even then it wasn't enough to help him deal with the bright sun and earlyish mornings. He slouched down further, trying to think of ways of getting out of Nezu's faculty meeting that morning when the child ran straight into him. He stumbled slightly and reached for his capture weapon ready to defend against his attacker, but there was no villain, just a little kid, plopped on the ground. The kid looked up with wide eyes, and bowed his head, murmuring a nervous apology. He seemed young. Maybe elementary school? Because who was he? Kidding, he worked with teenagers, not kids. He never could figure out their age. They were just small, dirty, and a little helpless. But if he had to hazard a guess he would say the kid was 5 or 6. It was odd. The kid was young but old enough to go to school, and yet he was wearing ripped jeans and a dirty, oversized shirt. Aizawa looked at the kid, fingering his scarf. Something didn't feel quite right. The kid's head was still bowed in apology, but Aizawa could see him trying to glance at him, waiting for his response to the apology. "It's fine," he said. Maybe a little gruffer than he should have considering the kid's flinch. But the kid just kept staring at him, and not leaving. He was about to ask if the kid needed something when the boy finally spoke up. "Excuse me, sir, can you help me?" Aizawa glanced at his watch. The faculty meeting started in 15 minutes. If he stayed and helped the kid, he might be late or worse yet, miss it. But he was a hero, and who was he to ignore a child, especially one with such big green eyes? They were like a kitten, round, pleading, begging for help. It would be a shame, him missing Nedzu's rambling lecture, but he could get the condensed version from MIC or Midnight. "All right, kid," he said, "what's the problem?" The boy's eyes welled up with tears and Aizawa felt his stone heart crack. "It's my sister, she needs help." The kid grabbed his hand, tugging, "Please come." Giving in to the kid's large eyes, Aizawa let himself be led as the child hurried down the side street, pulling him along as they turned down multiple different alleys. After 5 minutes of hurrying, he spoke up. "Where are we going?" The green-eyed child looked back with a nervous smile. "We're almost there." Didn't answer my question, Aizawa thought. The kid skidded to a stop and let go of his hand. Aizawa looked around. It was just another side alley tucked away from the noise and bustle of the street. No girl, no sister, in sight. "Are you Eraserhead?" a voice said. Aizawa spun around, quirk activating before settling back down. It was just another kid. This one was maybe old enough to pass as one of his students, or at least he had the height too. His lavender hair stood straight up, defying gravity, as he stood arms crossed, glaring at Aizawa. "Are you, or are you not Eraserhead?" he said again. Aizawa's hair stood up on end. He was an underground hero. People didn't know who he was, especially not kids. How did this kid know who he was? Warily Aizawa straightened, turning towards the new kid while surreptitiously examining the side street for enemies. There was an overflowing dumpster, a rickety fire escape and a ton of graffiti, but the road was quiet, there was no one around. Aizawa couldn't see or hear any hostiles. Still, something felt wrong. To his side the green-haired kid bounced nervously, eyes locked on him, pleading. The eyes did him in. Looking back at the purple-haired kid he let out a breath, "How do I dash?" He froze. And the world snapped away from him, all sensation bleeding out of his body. He tried to speak but his mouth felt disconnected. He was floating above it all. "Gotcha," the purple-haired brat smirked. Aizawa tried to retort but his body was unresponsive. He was drifting, attached to his body and aware, but all control had seemingly vanished. He was tricked. That brat had tricked him. He couldn't move. He reached for his quirk and tried to activate it, but it slipped out of his grasp. This was a problem. He was helpless, incapable of defending himself or breaking out of this quirk. Unable to even turn his head to look around, Aizawa could only hear the nervous muttering of the green-haired kid who had led him here. "Do you have him?" Purple Brat's eyes narrowed. "Eraserhead, kneel." Growling internally, Aizawa kneeled on the filthy street, arms hanging limp at his sides. He mentally tugged against his limbs but there was no movement, no sensation, nothing. He felt like a puppet, yanking futilely at his strings only for another to pull them. The kid's quirk wasn't paralyzation, it was some sort of mind control. His mouth went ashen. The situation had just gotten a lot more serious. The green-head traitor let out a happy sigh. "Thank goodness." Purple Brat smirked. "Doubting me there were you, Deku?" "No, never," came the fervent reply. The green-haired traitor, Deku, turned back towards him, biting his lip. "Are we really kidnapping a pro-hero?" Aizawa's lungs stopped working, air catching in his throat. "They were doing what?" The purple brat raked a hand through his hair. "It was your idea, Deku. You were the one that said this was the only way to help Eri." I know. "Then stop worrying. Not going to help now." "Okay, Toshi." Aizawa's heart stopped. That baby-faced green-haired brat had intentionally led him here to kidnap him, Eraserhead, a pro-hero, fully knowing who he was. And he had fallen for it. It wasn't like this was the first time Aizawa had gotten captured. In his line of work it happened sometimes. But it was usually ticked off mob bosses, or villains with a vendetta, not a 6-year-old kid and his friend. If MIC or Midnight ever got wind of this, they would never let him live it down. That was if he managed to get out of this. He should have just gone to that stupid meeting. Deku walked over, avoiding his eyes. Tiny hands ran over his body, gently patting him down. He unclipped his utility belt and tucked in the corner along with his capture weapon. But the boy paused at his yellow goggles, breathing in sharply. Hands shaking, he pulled it up and over Aizawa's head, careful to not let it catch in his hair. He held them in his hands as if they were a trophy. "Toshi," he said, voice alight with awe, "these are Eraserhead's goggles." "Yes, Deku, I'm aware, he's kneeling right there." Aizawa glared inwardly, but the kid beamed, sliding the goggles over his head to let them rest on his chest. "What do you think?" "Very nice. Now, can you hurry up?" Aizawa strained again against whatever was holding him still. He flexed his fingers, kicked his legs, shouted profanities, but nothing. Deku turned back to him, giving him an apologetic look, before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a long fabric. A BLNDFLD, he realized. "Sorry, Mr. Eraserhead." Deku reached his arms around Aizawa, carefully settling the cloth over his eyes and tying it firmly in the back. He was restrained and Bond fled. "Great. Okay, Toshi, it's all good now." "Toshi," the purple-haired brat hummed in agreement. "Stand." The order came and Aizawa obeyed, getting to his feet. "Take his hand and follow." A little hand slipped into his and tugged him along. Legs still and robotic, he began moving. He was being kidnapped, he realized. Kidnapped by kids. If the kids were part of a larger organization using kids to do their dirty work of luring him in, then he was in trouble. And the kids were probably in trouble too. But this sounded like the kids were doing it of their own free will. But why? They knew who he was, and had targeted him in particular. The purple brat, Toshi, he thought, that was the kid controlling him with his quirk. It left his body completely unresponsive, but at least his mind was clear. The other one, Deku, was just the bait and the mastermind, even though he didn't look old enough to even be in middle school. He'd just have to see what happened, he thought, still numbly following after. It wasn't like he had much of a choice. The kids were smarter than he originally thought. He had been keeping careful track of the turns they were making, charting their route in his head when the order came. "Spin around in a circle 6 times. Aizawa spun, and off they went again. But every couple of minutes they would stop and he would be ordered to spin before moving on. They didn't want him knowing where they were going. And after stopping 6 different stops to spin, Aizawa wasn't quite sure where they were going anymore or if he could throw up while under the quirk's control. He never stopped pulling and pushing on his limbs, trying to get a response out of them, but nothing worked. He was helpless against the quirk unless he could think of a way out. All quirks had weaknesses, he just had to find this one. "Watch your step," piped up Deku as he helped Aizawa up and over a step. "You know he can't see." "I know that. I'm just trying to help." The voices echoed slightly and the light seeping through the BLNDFLD had gotten dimmer. They were in a building now. Deku continued to lead the way, his feet quiet against the tile, as he led Aizawa further into the building. Finally, they stopped, Deku's hand slipping out of Aizawa's to leave him standing there, limp like a doll. There was a third person there now, a girl, whispering to Deku and Toshi. Aizawa strained to hear but only managed to catch pieces of the conversation. "How's she doing?" "Not, hasn't broken. Horn still glowing." "We got." "Are you sure?" "Much of a choice." There was a murmured agreement, and steps padding back towards him. Deku's small fingers slipped into his hand and tugged him along. A door creaked open and Aizawa was pulled through. "Hey!" Deku whispered. Aizawa could hear the muffled sobs of yet another child. How many of these kids were there running around? The girl, Eri, whimpered, "Go away, it's not safe." "I'm not safe." Her voice cracked at the end, and Aizawa strained yet again against the control, forcing him to just stand there. What was going on? What was wrong with the girl? "It's okay," Deku said. "No. I don't want to hurt you again. Just go away." "Hey, it's okay," the other girl said from behind Aizawa. Deku and Toshi brought someone to help. Deku spoke up, "His name is Eraserhead. He's a hero. He can erase quirks. He can turn off yours." Wait, that was why the kids grabbed him? To erase her quirk? It sounded like she lacked control and that her quirk was dangerous enough that they couldn't get close. So they needed someone who could turn it off from a distance. "Hey, will you please let us just try?" said Toshi. The girl sniffled, "Okay." There was a little jump, the sound of reaching. "I'm not," another grunt of effort, Toshi, I'm not tall enough. There was a hint of amusement in Toshi's voice as he gave the command, Eraserhead, kneel. Aizawa kneeled and Deku quickly untied the blndfld, pulling it off. Blinking, Aizawa tried his best to look around the room despite still being under the quirk's control. They were in a small, dark room, weakly illuminated by a desk lamp. Shoved against the wall was a dirty mattress where the girl sat today. She didn't look well. She huddled in a blanket, her thin arms wrapped tightly around her legs as she shivered. Her face was white and covered in a sheen of sweat. More noticeable was the large white horn protruding out of her temple. Light poured from the top of it, shimmering as it pooled around her. It was obviously her quirk, but it was hard to tell what it did. To Aizawa's side, Deku stood, bouncing from foot to foot. He looked dying to run over to her, but all of the children were giving her a wide berth. Her quirk must be far more dangerous than it looked. And he'd had to guess she lacked any sort of control if they required his help. They must have been desperate to turn off her quirk if they had been willing to kidnap a pro. Purple Brat spoke up behind him, use your quirk on her. Aizawa didn't fight against the command and freely allowed the mind control to activate his quirk. His eyes flashed red and his hair stood up, twisting as he willed the girl's quirk to turn off. Immediately the glow stopped. The girl's eyes fluttered and she slumped down on the mattress. Eri! Deku screamed, and rushed to her side, ignoring the worried cries of his friends. Aizawa's eyes burned as he watched Deku frantically check her over. Arms shaking, he brushed the hair out of her face and lowered his head to her chest. A moment passed and he looked up tearful. She's okay. The two kids behind him let out a sigh of relief, and Aizawa felt himself do the same. Deku hugged the limp girl, cradling her against him. He pressed his forehead to hers, and they rocked on the filthy mattress. Eri, he murmured, whispering her name like it was a prayer. Eri, Eri, it's going to be okay. The girl stirred, eyes creaking open. Deku? Yes, Deku said, his eyes still leaking. I'm here, Eri. It's okay. The girl hummed and closed her eyes again, content to rest in Deku's arms. Deku continued to rock her, murmuring reassurances. These kids, Aizawa thought. He wasn't sure if he wanted to scoop them up or strangle them. They were just so. They are so cute. Aizawa's attention snapped back to the two other kids standing behind him. The other girl had spoken up and he could hear coo. Toshi snorted, of course you're a sucker for it. And you're not? Admit it, they are adorable. Never. Aizawa wanted to snort, they were worse than his students. But he was glad he had been able to help, although his burning eyes were begging for him to blink. Aren't you going to have him turn his quirk off? Oh, duh. Eraserhead, blink. Aizawa blinked. Thank goodness. I'll go take him back, said Toshi. Deku looked up from the mattress where he sat still cuddling. I can come dash. No Deku. I can handle one pro. Brat, thought Aizawa. That kid was just begging for a smackdown. Toshi continued, ignorant of Aizawa's growing desire to smack him. You and Ocha stay with Eri. Deku nodded, lips trembling. Aizawa was once again bond-fled and ordered to stand up. With a brief goodbye, they left with Toshi pulling him along. They walked for several minutes, pausing to spin Aizawa, and then carrying on. Finally, the order came to stop. The blndfld was removed and Toshi flashed him a grin and a mock salute. Thanks for your assistance, Eraserhead. The purple-haired boy took off, leaving Aizawa standing there, still frozen under the control of the quirk. It took 3 minutes of Aizawa waiting, worrying if the quirk was going to ever wear off when the feeling in his body snapped back. He jolted, and let out a loud swear, looking around to see if the purple-haired brat was hiding somewhere. When he wasn't spotted, Aizawa sighed, running a hand down his face before checking the time. It had only been 40 minutes. He looked around again, glaring. Those kids. Those stupid, suicidal kids. Who kidnapped a pro hero? He wanted to be furious, but he could tell how scared they had been for that girl Eri. Aizawa might have been their only hope. But still. That could have ended so badly for them. He scowled. He needed to go and find his equipment and get to UA before MIC freaked out too much. As much as he wanted to stay and hunt these kids down, he knew he needed to leave. Those kids might not have school, but he did, and Aizawa didn't trust his students to not burn down the building in his absence. But after that? A grin crept across his face. He'd leave now, but this wasn't over. Far from it. He'd find those kids. They were on their own and needing help. Blame his bleeding heart, but was going to make sure they got the help they needed. And if they complained? His smile just grew larger. Well, then they had picked the wrong hero to kidnap. It was the first day of school and Aizawa was already done. Unwilling to get up, Aizawa had managed to roll all the way from the teacher's lounge to classroom 1A without getting out of his sleeping bag. Did he look ridiculous? Yes, but he was going to stay in his warm little cocoon for as long as he could. Behind the door, he could hear his new students talking and wondered how many he would expel this year. The staff had even been taking bets in the teacher's lounge this morning about how many students would be gone by the end of the day. He ignored them but had smirked at seeing All Might looking on from the side, a panicked look on his face. Aizawa couldn't care less. His job was to train students so that they wouldn't die when they transitioned to working heroes. And if he thought that they weren't capable enough to survive, well, he'd rather his students have a broken heart than a stabbed one. Listening, he could make out some of the individual voices. One of them, a girl's voice, was starting to nag him. Her voice, he recognized that voice. When had he heard that voice? From the back of his mind, a voice echoed in his memories, "They are so cute. Admit it, they are adorable. Aren't you going to have him turn his quirk off?" His plans to scare the class as a human caterpillar forgot, he stood up in his sleeping bag faster than should be possible and threw the classroom door open with a bang. The students whipped around and stopped, staring in shock. One of the girls, Ashido, he thought, had her mouth hanging almost all the way to the floor. Another student, Tensai's brother, had frozen with his arm mid-chop. All the students were looking at him. But Aizawa's attention was focused on a girl standing towards the front of the classroom. Her face was rapidly draining of any color, and her hands were shaking. Aizawa's eyes narrowed and the girl let out a nervous eep. "Excuse me," said the frog girl, Asui, as she raised her hand and looked at him. "Are you our teacher?" Aizawa blinked, breaking eye contact with the paling girl, and turned to Asui. The students tittered nervously, and Aizawa sighed into his scarf. Unzipping his sleeping bag, he stepped out, letting it fall to the ground. Flatly observing his students, he spoke, "Welcome to UA's hero course." As you correctly guessed, Asui. She sat up straighter at the mention of her name. "I am your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa." The kids were still staring at him confused and he sighed. "No, this is not a joke, and yes, I am a pro hero." Unfortunately, he had had students in the past go to Nezu just to make sure. It was foolish. Not every hero fits the stereotypical hero mold. Like All Might. But that didn't mean they weren't a hero or not dangerous. Hopefully, these students would figure that out quick enough. He grabbed a gym uniform and threw it at the pale girl still standing in front of him. She yelped and fumbled to grab it. She seemed rather nervous. "Put these on and head outside," he said, turning to walk away, not looking to see if his students were following. He needed to check something. Aizawa stood out at the field, checking over the class roster again. He tried to make a point of learning every student's name and quirk before the first day of class. He was a teacher and responsible for any possible mishaps. It was just rational to prepare and know as much about his students as possible. But this question required him to look again. Okako Uraraka. She was an unassuming girl. Uraraka did pretty well in the school entrance exam, her scores landing her in about the middle of the pack. Her quirk, zero gravity, wasn't the most flashy, but she managed to take out quite a few robots with it. She had also been surprisingly attentive at making sure she didn't crush anyone in battle. And also adept at using her quirk to maneuver around the city. He had remembered looking at the screen and wondering if someone had trained her in quirk usage. Now looking back at the paperwork, he found that very unlikely. Her parents owned a struggling construction company. It was doubtful that they could afford private quirk training. Especially if her family was poor enough that Nezu had placed her on the financial watch list. They sometimes did that with lower-income students. It let the teachers know to make sure the students were getting enough to eat and had warm enough clothes. The kids were a huge investment. They were the world's future heroes, and as teachers, they had to make sure their students were being taken care of. But that wasn't what Aizawa was looking for. He scanned the paper, looking for her address. His eyes narrowed. She was from the Mie prefecture. It was a poorer area, with a larger homeless population. It also just so happened to be the area he had been in when he was, he hated to admit it, kidnapped by those kids. He tapped his finger against the paper. It could be a coincidence, but Aizawa had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him that Okako Uraraka knew something. He glanced up as he saw the students slowly making their way towards him in a large nervous herd. He snorted, he wasn't that scary. Although they might think otherwise in the next couple of minutes. The kids shuffled in, some pulling at the gym uniform. He waited until they were all there and quiet before jumping in, explaining what they would be doing. There was a typical complaint. Students worried about missing the orientation, which Aizawa shot down. This was the hero course, they weren't bound to any traditions and Aizawa could run his classroom as he saw fit. And if he chose to put the students through fitness tests instead of sitting through Nezu's annual rambling lecture, well, it was only rational. Time was precious, and there was no need to waste it on pointless ceremonies he would sleep through. He had Bakugo start off the first tests. Unsurprisingly, the boy did well. He had a lot of potential as a hero, even if he might need to tone it back. As the student began to talk excitedly about how fun this looked, Aizawa felt his ire rise. They may be teenagers, but this was the UA Heroes course and anyone who wouldn't take it seriously shouldn't be there. Irritated, he informed them that the student who placed last would be expelled, and grinned as he saw the panic rise on their faces. Time to see how plus ultra they would be. As the tests continued, Aizawa was pleased. They weren't perfect, but most of the students had a good understanding of their quirk and used them well. But that girl Uraraka. He buried his head into his scarf. He'll be keeping an eye on her for sure. Okako's life was over. And she had thought today was going to be such a good day. She had made it into UA, her dream school. Her parents had been beaming with joy when she told them. Telling Deku and the gang had been even better. Deku looked at her in awe when he saw the hologram, his eyes wide and shining. He gave her a hug, chattering excitedly about how amazing UA was. She knew Deku wasn't actually 6, that mentally he was very much a teenager. But sometimes it was easy to forget when she saw his long lashes and short frame. He was an adorable kid. So when he started off on one of his hero rants, it still blew her mind how much he knew. He was muttering to himself about all the heroes that worked there, and the subjects they taught, and how cool it would be to be taught by actual heroes, and do you think she could get autographs from them or ask how their quirks worked and would all might be teaching her class. She laughed and turned to Hitoshi, who was standing there with a tortured look on his face. Don't laugh. This is what I deal with every single day, he deadpanned. Deku looked up from his mumble storm. He blushed. Oh, sorry Ocha. Toshi looked at him, offended. You're apologizing to her? What about me? Deku stuttered, tripping over his words to apologize. Okako laughed again, hiding it behind her hands. A hand reached up to tug on her shirt. Ocha, came a small voice. Yes, Eri? The little girl shuffled, hiding her face behind her hair. What's UA? Okako's smile slipped. Deku and Toshi hadn't told her much about Eri's past, other than that she had been hurt and used by villains. But sometimes her lack of knowledge of basic things worried her. Deku piped up, it's this amazing school for heroes. It's always been my dream to go. Toshi too. Okako glanced over. Really? I didn't know that about you. He shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah. It's true. UA was always a dream of mine. Then why don't you go? Eri asked. The two of them winced. I don't have a quirk, Deku said, omitting the fact that having a 6-year-old body didn't help either. Toshi. He sighed and crouched down to give her a sad smile. It's a hero school, and they don't want someone with a villainous quirk. Eri's lip wobbled. But you're not a villain, she cried. She looked at both Toshi and Deku. You're heroes. You saved me. That's what heroes do? Don't they? Deku nodded. Yes, that's what they do. But sometimes people have a hard time seeing that someone's quirk doesn't define them. Eri's eyes welled with tears. Am I a villain? My quirk, it only hurts people. Kai always said it was a curse. No, it's not. Deku said. But I hurt you, she cried. I hurt you even though you saved me. I used my quirk on Yo Dash. Deku ran over and wrapped her up in a hug. He said, you are not a villain. The girl cried silently, shaking her head. Toshi kneeled down. Deku is right. You are not a villain. He swallowed thickly. It's like Deku said, don't let your quirk define you. It doesn't make you good or bad, just you. She looked at him through watery eyes. Even though I hurt Deku? Yes, said Deku, hugging her tight. I've told you before and I'll tell you again. It's okay. He smiled wobbly. I'm still me, I just look younger, and, he giggled, it makes us look like siblings. Really? Yep. I'm like your small big brother. Toshi snorted at that, giving a rare smile. Small big brother, I like that. What about Toshi? What about me? Are you my brother, too? Toshi's eyes widened and then he knelt, hugging her other side. Of course, Eri. I'd be proud too. And Ocha? Akiko froze, blushing slightly. Well, she's your big sister. Akiko's eyes flew to Deku, who was looking at her, eyes serious. She's a part of this family too. Akiko's heart was about ready to burst. She bent to wrap them all up in a hug. Of course I am. Deku squeaked as she squeezed them. I'm happy to be your big sister Eri. She closed her eyes, enjoying the sensation of being with people she cared about. She needed to savor this moment of happiness. She had always wanted siblings, but she had never expected to get any. At least, she hadn't when she found Deku, Toshi, and Eri camping in her parents' worksite. She hugged tighter, ignoring Toshi's fake dying sounds as he tried to wiggle out. She wouldn't trade it for anything. They were her family now, and she would protect her family. So that was why it was so unfortunate that freaking Eraserhead was her homeroom teacher. She stared at the ground. Deku had theorized before that she could maybe control dirt or sand if she touched enough. He had thought she could use it to temporarily blind opponents or create a distraction. Right now she just wanted to use it to dig a hole. Bury herself in the sand and save Mr. Aizawa the trouble of doing it for her. Are you all right, Kero? The frog girl Asui looked at her. You've been staring at the ground for the past several minutes. Oh, really? She blinked. I hadn't noticed. Uraraka. If you are not feeling good you should see Recovery Girl. Ida said, chopping the air. He seemed a little strict but had a good heart. Akiko had saved him from faceplanting while walking into UA's entrance exam. He had thanked her profusely this morning and stuck to her side. It was surprising, but Ida claimed he was impressed by her quick reflexes and heroic nature. She smiled weakly. I'm okay. Just a little tired. She looked up only to see Aizawa staring at her from the sidelines. She gulped and tried to hide under a big smile. I'll be fine. I promise. Asui looked at her and then looked at Aizawa. He makes you nervous. Doesn't he? What? No. Ida interrupted. Uraraka, if it's the tests you're worried about then don't be. I have no fears about you not passing. He adjusted his glasses. I will admit that his methods do seem a bit extreme, but this is UA and I have no doubt. She smiled inwardly. Deku would like him, she thought. They both could go on and on. Uraraka. She turned. Aizawa looked at her, holding out a softball. You're up. She clenched her fists together to stop them from shaking. It's okay, she chanted to herself as she walked up and accepted the ball. It was 6 months ago. He's probably forgotten. She stepped up to the pitching mound. Okay, he probably hasn't forgotten, but it's not like he saw her. Right? She activated her quirk on the ball and chucked it into the air. It sailed farther and farther away, and she wished she could join it. Besides, she thought, he only heard my voice, and not even that much. Deku was doing most of the talking. And they didn't mention her name? Or did they? Aizawa looked at her and held up the scanner. Infinity. Good job. Okiko hurried back to the safety of the crowd, unaware of her classmates cheering her on. Now that she thought about that, Toshi did mention her name. Crap. Was it her first name or the nickname? She thought it was the nickname. The rest of the tests passed and finished in a blur, with some orange-haired boy getting expelled. But Okiko was too worked up in her own thoughts to pay attention. Ocha isn't too close to Okiko. Right? Right? Yeah, it's totally different. And it's not like Mr. Aizawa will be calling us by our first name. It's fine. Everything is fine. She plastered a fake smile on her face and laughed with her classmates. But when school ended, she practically sprinted out the gates, desperate to get away from Eraserhead's watching eyes. She was in so much trouble. So what's with the cat? Midnight said. They stood in the empty teacher's lounge, the smell of cheap, burnt coffee, thick in the air. Midnight leaned against her desk smiling as she held the black kitten Aizawa had move upon her. She pressed it against her face and raised an eyebrow as she waited for his response. Aizawa grunted. It's to test a theory. And it requires a cat. He glared at Midnight. Yes, it requires a cat. He pinched the bridge of his nose. I just need you to go to this student Ochaka Uraka and get her to say that's so cute. That's all. You don't have to use the cat, I just thought it would help. You want me to get a student to say that's so cute? Yes, he said, burying his head in his scarf, regretting this entire conversation. And I need you to record it. Shota, Midnight said, propping her chin upon her hands. Are you planning to do something naughty? It's just for a case. Right. Aizawa looked at her. Will you do it or not? She laughed. I will. Don't get so uptight, Shota. A girl needs someone who can have fun. She snuggled the kitten and grinned. I'll get your recording for you. Thanks, he said and walked back over to the coffee machine. He'd already had 3 cups today, but a 4th one shouldn't kill him. It was a necessity to survive this insane job. He poured himself a cup, watching it steam. He wasn't going to regret this. Right? Midnight stood leaning against the entrance to UA, cat propped up on her shoulder and phone in her hand. Her hero glasses had been switched out for her civilian ones, but she was still dressed in her hero uniform. She turned as the doors opened. Aizawa slumped out, MIC a few paces behind, chattering excitedly. Aizawa held up a hand, cutting off his boisterous friend, and looked at Midnight. Did you get the recording? Midnight gasped theatrically, I'm offended, Shota. Of course, I got it. She winked. I'm used to retrieving shady recordings for desperate men. It's not. He slunk deeper into his capture weapon. As I said, it's just for a case. Aha. Aizawa held out a hand. Are you going to give it, or not? Midnight hummed, I'll consider it. If you tell me why you want it. I told you, it's for a case. What case? Just a case. She looked at the kitten still sitting on her shoulder. Somehow I don't believe him. Do you, Mr. Fluffles? It's a girl cat. Fine. Mrs. Fluffles. The cat meowed, nuzzling her head. I thought so. She turned back. Sorry, Shota, I'm not giving you the recording until you explain why. Wait, I'm confused. MIC popped in. What sort of recording did our boy Shota ask you for? And more importantly, why didn't you ask me? Aizawa ignored his friend, choosing to glare at Midnight. That grumpy face is not going to work this time. Her smile slipped and her eyes grew serious. I trust you, Shota. But I want to know why you wanted a recording of a student. They are my students too, and if something is wrong, I need to know. Wait. You recorded a student. Shota. Aizawa closed his eyes. Why am I friends with you two again? MIC flopped onto Aizawa, wrapping an arm around him. It's cause you love us. Now, seriously though, he looked at Aizawa over the top of his glasses. What's going on? Aizawa breathed deeply before opening his eyes again. I think she was there when I was temporarily taken by those kids 6 months ago. You mean when you were kidnapped by a 6-year-old? Yes, Aizawa grumbled. Wait, you're still looking for them? Asked MIC. Yes, I'm still looking for them. There were 4 kids there. I saw 3 of them, but I only heard the 4th. And you think Uraraka is the 4th? Said Midnight. Possibly. How do you still even remember the voices? Asked MIC. It's been a while. Midnight grinned. It's his secret quirk, hunting down sad, hurt children. His inner dish. Aizawa's eyes flashed red and his scarf whipped up. Don't even think about completing that word. Dad? Said MIC. Aizawa's scarf flared to life and wrapped MIC up, cocooning him his scarf. MIC toppled to the ground. Sorry. I'm sorry, he yelled, muffled by the scarf. Ignoring him, Aizawa turned back to Midnight. Now will you give me the recording or not? Fine, fine. I got what I wanted. She clicked her phone and a video sprung to life. There was a spitting sound, and Uraraka yelling out, so cute. They are so cute. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. It's her. It is. MIC had managed to get to his feet and get the capture weapon off his mouth. Well, that's great. Glad you figured it out. He grinned and put an arm of Aizawa's shoulder. Now can you get this off of me? Deku sat in his corner, fiddling with the heater. It had broken down again, and with A not feeling well, it was important that he got it working. It was a miracle that the heater even worked in the first place and hadn't caught on fire when Deku first turned it on. He had built it with scavenged pieces from garbage cans and trash from the Mutsufu beach. It was his own mechanical Frankenstein. Biting his lip, he flipped the switch and the machine whined, shooting out sparks. Deku sighed and turned it off. He had sent Toshi out to try to find some extra parts to fix it. But the heater was in such bad condition that he was uncertain that it would ever work again. Discouraged, Deku shoved the broken heater to the side. His small fingers were dirty, but it was hard to find gloves his size. He wiped them on a rag before pulling his goggles off his face, letting them rest on his chest. They were an odd yellow, with vertical stripes across the visor. A little ugly, but Deku loved them. They had belonged to Eraserhead before Deku stole them. He knew the hero probably wanted them back, but they were so cool. He always wore them when he tinkered. They had been built for hero work and were strong. Perfect for withstanding the debris and smoke that accompanied Deku's fiddling. He fingered them, running a finger up and down the stripes. Even when he wasn't working, he still liked to wear them. They were comforting. When he was younger, he had a huge hero memorabilia collection. It was full of posters, books, and action figures, everything a young boy would want. But when his mom lost her job and financial crises left them homeless, he had lost it all. All he had now was a melted All Might figurine that Toshi had found for him, and Eraserhead's goggles. He smiled. They had been pretty bold kidnapping Eraser like that. Deku hoped the hero wasn't too mad at them. He really had been their only choice. Someday, they would make it up to him. Turning back towards his tools, Deku began putting them away in his cardboard toolbox. Then, standing up, he walked over to the mattress where Eri was napping. Ever since she had had her quirk episode, her strength and energy had been sapped. She wasn't sick anymore, but she didn't seem healthy either. Deku and Toshi worried about it daily, but there was little they could do. Overhaul was still looking for her, so going to the hospital or police was out of the question. The Yakuza may be small in numbers, but they still had the resources necessary to hunt Eri down. So it was crucial that they stayed hidden. Eri had told them what Overhaul had done to her. How he had experimented on her and used her body to hurt others. Eri had tried to warn them, but her story had only made Deku and Toshi more angry and determined. They would not let Overhaul lay a single finger on her, ever again. Eri was still asleep, curled up on the mattress as she had been for the past 3 hours. She had on ratty oversized sweats and a cat shirt that Toshi had found in her size. Smiling, he sat down by her, his back resting against the wall, and her body pressed up against his side. She whimpered, and Deku ran his dirty fingers through her tangled hair. "It's okay, Eri," he murmured. "You're safe. I'm right here." Eri sighed in her sleep and snuggled up closer to Deku, burying her face into his leg. He wished they could give her more. Even though it had been 9 months since they rescued her, she would still have nightmares. She wouldn't scream, but she would curl up tight and whimper, and the next morning her eyes would be dull and flat. He wished they could fight back against Overhaul, defeat him once and for all. But they were only kids. They could only run and hide and prepare. They had had to run not long after they temporarily kidnapped Eraserhead. The Yakuza had been closer to finding their base, and so the three of them had been forced to flee. Ocha had saved them again. This time helping them find an abandoned drag corner store in the Mutsufu region. They had converted the break room into their bedroom and living space. As the shelter went, it wasn't half bad. Deku had put his tinkering skills to work to make it more livable. His heater wasn't working, but that was okay. He had wired into the power line, so they still had spotty electricity in the backroom. And there was also the hot plate and a crooked lamp he had fixed. It wasn't much, but it was home. Which was why the thought of losing it was that much more painful. Rumor was that the gang was getting close, and if the Yakuza found them, they would have no choice but to run. Deku and Toshi knew that eventually, their luck would run out. But that didn't mean they hadn't been preparing. Or that they would let Eri go without a fight. Deku rubbed her back. Hopefully, it would never come to that, but if it did, there were plans. They involved a dress and would probably end with his death, but at least they had plans. There was a rap at the front of the drag store, a tap tap a tap tap. The special knock that only Ocha knew. Grinning, Deku shifted away from Eri and tiptoed towards the front. As happy as he was to hear that Ocha was here, he still didn't want to disturb Eri. Opening the door that separated the back room from the rest of the store, Deku slipped out. Peering over the counter, he could see Ocha up by the door, moving her way around the trash and knocked over shelves. Ocha looked upset, her normally cheerful and upbeat face twisted in worry. She brightened when she saw Deku, but it was obvious something had upset her. Putting a finger to his lip, he motioned for her to come behind the counter. Eri is sleeping and Toshi is out scavenging, he whispered. We can chat, but we'll have to keep quiet. Ocha nodded and they creaked the backroom door open, slipping in. They settled on the ground, trying to find a comfortable spot of concrete to sit on. Bouncing excitedly, Izuku hugged Ocha. How was your first day of school? You didn't come yesterday and I've been waiting to hear. Ocha smiled but rubbed her neck. It was good. And? When she didn't respond, Deku continued, what else? How are your classmates? Do they have cool quirks? Have you had any hero studies classes yet? What about All Might? Have you seen Dash? Eraserhead is my homeroom teacher. Deku blinked, and his excited face fell. Oh. Yeah, Ocha buried her hands in her face. Are you worried that he Dash remembers me? Oh yeah. It feels like he's been watching me non-stop the past 2 days. I keep wondering if he knows or if he even suspects, but it's not like I can ask him. I'm so sorry, Ocha, said Deku. This is my fault. I should have realized that since he works at UA that there might be a chance of you two crossing paths. Why didn't I think? Ocha put on a brave smile. It's okay, Deku. Mistakes happen. Besides, it's not like he saw me, he only heard my voice. We're totally good. Right? Deku bit his lip and looked at her concerned. Eraserhead is a good hero because he's smart. He's not the strongest, but his technique is amazing and he's very rational. He's been able to catch a lot of villains that other pros couldn't because of that. I really am in trouble. Aren't I? Deku didn't answer, just stared at the concrete ground. Well, he doesn't have any proof. That's a good thing. He didn't see you during his kidnapping? Yeah. So he doesn't have any proof connecting you to us. So you're good. But that means I can't come and visit anymore. Can I? Deku's eyes filled and he sunk into himself, fiddling with his fingers. He could feel his chubby cheeks flush and his nose start to run. Ocha's eyes filled with tears as well. The silence was answer. Enough. I'm sorry. Deku burst out, his tiny body trembling. This is my fault. Ocha sniffled, wiping at tears. It's not your fault. It just. Sometimes it just goes that way. Deku began sobbing, wiping at his running nose and eyes. The sight made Ocha cry harder as she reached over to wrap Deku up in a hug. They sat there for minutes, hugging and crying before Ocha moved away. She smiled shakily as she looked over at Eri. I really wanted to be her big sister. You still are. We'll find a way. We probably can't meet for a little bit, but after a month or two we could try meeting up. Not here. But somewhere else? 'Cause I don't want to say goodbye. And Eri and Toshi will be really upset if they don't see you again. Ocha laughed weakly. Toshi will be upset? We all will. Toshi doesn't always show it, but he really cares. It takes a bit for him to trust someone new, but he trusts you. We all trust you. Thanks, Ocha said in a quiet voice. You guys mean a lot to me. Deku smiled wobbly, tears still shining in his eyes. Thanks, Ocha. The two sat in silence for a bit, both emotionally drained. And when Ocha eventually left, he still sat there. It was exhausting, he realized. To lose another person he cared about. He tried not to let his quirklessness bug him too much. But sometimes in situations like this, or like with A, he wished he had a quirk. Something to help. He went by Deku as a joke. He had had a friend when he was a kid, who gave him the nickname Useless. He had hated it at first but had tried to grow to accept it. If people thought he was useless they would underestimate him, and he could use that to prove them wrong. But sometimes it seemed like the world was determined to make him useless. He was quirkless. He lost his home and then his mother. And then he got rewound from 15 to 6, a little kid. He wouldn't give up. And he would use what he could to his advantage. There were occasional perks with being 6. People were a lot more trusting and willing to help. People underestimated him because he was just a little boy with bouncing curls and big eyes. He was so cute and helpless. A yawn from the mattress caught his attention and he turned to see Eri, sitting up, yawning and stretching. Standing up, he walked over towards her. It could be frustrating being 6, but he would never let Eri know. She felt guilty about too many things and he refused to be another one of them. He would keep telling Eri it was okay until she believed him. Deku wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close as she continued to wake up. He may not like being 6 again, but his age and size were crucial to their plan to keep Eri safe. He could deal with his age if it kept Eri out of Overhaul's hands. Where's Toshi? Asked Eri as she blinked the sleep from her eyes. Deku stroked her hair, his out scavenging. There are some parts one needed and we needed food. Oh, okay. He'll be back pretty soon I think. It's starting to dish. The trembling wall was their only warning before there was a loud boom. Instinctively Deku lurched forward, covering Eri with his body. It took only a moment for him to realize that the crash of shattered glass and the crumbling building was coming from the front. Panicked, Deku pulled Eri to her feet. Her eyes were blown wide and her hands were trembling. It's Overhaul, she whimpered. On cue, the villain roared, You can't hide from me. Running, Deku pulled Eri along. He shoved her towards their escape route as he scrambled on the ground for his gadgets and the dress. The dress. He couldn't forget the dress. Go Eri! Deku yelled. You know the plan. I'll catch up. He flashed her his best all-might smile. It'll be okay, I've got this. Eyes welling with tears, Eri nodded and took off, leaving Deku alone. His smile fell. He hoped this would work. Aizawa crouched on the corner of a building, watching Uraraka hurry down an alleyway. As soon as he had confirmed that she was the 4th voice he had heard at his kidnapping, he had left MIC and Midnight. Her behavior on the first day of school showed that she knew who he was. If he wanted to follow her to where the children were hiding, it had to be now, in case she tried to stay away. He had spent several hours launching himself around the city, looking for any sign of her. He was lucky that he spotted her now. Uraraka's eyes were puffy and her nose was red, as though she had been crying. And she was coming from a strange area. It wasn't close to her house, or to any shops. Aizawa fingered his scarf. He might have caught her after visiting the kids. If that was the case, then they should be nearby. Swinging down from the rooftop, Aizawa ran along the street Uraraka had come from. This was different from the part of town he had been kidnapped from. The children were either meeting her here or they moved locations. Aizawa suspected the latter. Either way, the kids could be close by. He would deny it anytime MIC or Midnight teasingly asked, but he was worried about those stupid kids. After the kidnapping he had found himself frequently thinking, even dreaming about them. Was the little girl, Eri, okay? Had things improved after he used his quirk to turn off hers? The purple-haired brat, Toshi, had an incredibly powerful quirk. Why then, was the kid living on the street? Prejudice? Bad influences? The kid didn't act villainous. In fact, it was very clear that he cared about the little girl and the other boy, Deku. And Deku. He inspired the most questions. The boy looked so young and yet he was the leader and mastermind behind Aizawa's kidnapping. Was it a quirk? How had he known so much about who he was? The thoughts only caused Aizawa to run faster. Something in his gut had been warning him to find those kids since the day he laid eyes on them. They were children that were in trouble and needed help. And that's why he was running down random alleys looking for a flash of green eyes or purple hair. Because he would never turn his back on a child in need. He was shaken from his thoughts when in the distance he heard the loud boom of a building falling. Screams began to fill the air. Aizawa sighed. He technically wasn't on the clock, but if people needed help, they needed help. The kids would have to wait. Sliding his goggles up onto his eyes, he threw out his capture weapon and pulled himself into the air. Running along the rooftops, he followed the sound of crunching and yelling. With any luck, another hero would already be on the case, but if not, Eraserhead would be there. Running on top of power lines, he avoided the crowded streets and busy sidewalks. He had to get there, fast. And then, from the side alley, came Blur. A child running, a large hoodie over a tattered dress and a small horn peeking out from underneath. Eri. Behind her, a man followed, his golden eyes alight with fury as he roared, "Hey! Come back here now!" The girl shot a glance back but only ran faster. Growling from beneath a beak-shaped mask, the man crouched and slapped a hand against the ground. The concrete sidewalk rumbled, cracking as it raced towards the girl and exploded upwards in a large wall. Unable to stop in time, the girl ran into the wall, tumbling to the ground. Shaking her head, she stumbled to her feet and the man reached for her. Aizawa threw out his capture weapon from his perch on the power line, snagging the girl by her waist and launching her into the air and into Aizawa's open arms. She thrashed, trying to get out of the capture weapon around her waist. "It's okay, kid." Her body froze and she squeaked, "Eraserhead." Aizawa nodded and tucked the capture weapon around her, pinning her to his back. From his spot on top of the power line pole, he could see the man who had been chasing her. He was shaking in anger, his hands curling as he turned to face them. The villain slammed his hand against the ground, but Aizawa moved faster. He activated his quirk, his gaze blocking the villain's quirk. The villain growled, repeatedly slamming his hand on the ground. He glared up at Aizawa as the hero and villain stared at each other, waiting for the other to make a move. "That's Overhaul," the girl whispered. "His quirk allows him to deconstruct and reconstruct any matter he touches." She struggled again in Aizawa's scarf. "You have to let me go. It's me he wants and you can't fight him and carry me at the same time." "Not going to happen, kid," Aizawa said, glowing eyes locked on Overhaul. The villain, Overhaul, spoke, "You have to blink eventually, Eraserhead." Aizawa stiffened, very few knew he actually was. That made Overhaul that much more dangerous. Overhaul held out a hand, "Just give me the girl. She ran away several months ago and I've been looking for her since then." Aizawa's eyes narrowed as he tried to fight the stinging of his dry eyes. He couldn't keep them open much longer. He had to blink. He had to move then. Overhaul continued, "She's my daughter." "That's a lie. She's not your dog." The girl yelled, hands balled in fists. "I am here." All Might slammed onto the street raising dust as he let out his signature laugh. "Never fear, citizens, hope has arrived." This was Aizawa's chance to go. Latching onto a nearby building, he swung up and deposited the girl. From the street, All Might's grin grew wider as he reared his fist back. "Detroit smash!" The punch sent a wave of pressurized air towards Overhaul, and he went flying. Twisting in the air, the villain tried to orient himself. "Rikia!" he shouted. From an alley, an enormous man in a bird mask launched himself, grabbing Overhaul. Setting Overhaul on the ground, the villain spoke, "We need to go, boss, more heroes are coming." Overhaul hissed, "Not without Eri." Ripping his second glove off, he slammed both hands on the ground. A concrete spike jutted out of the sidewalk, launching him back towards Aizawa and Eri. All Might jumped, moving to block the villain. Eri screamed, "All Might! Don't let him touch you! He'll kill you!" Grunting, All Might twisted, punching the air, sending himself flying up into the sky and Overhaul crashing onto a car. Aizawa jumped to the ground, leaving Eri on the roof. This fight was looking nasty. Quirk activated, Aizawa ran towards the second villain, capture weapon billowing out. Rolling off the car, Overhaul launched a spike towards him, forcing Aizawa to break off his eyes contact as he rolled to avoid. Even with All Might, the fight was hard. If Overhaul touched either of them, it was game over, and the second man was no lightweight, with the act of his punches leaving craters in the road. Aizawa ducked and dodged, using his scarf to swing out of catastrophe, trying to keep an eye on Overhaul and while also keeping an eye on the girl. Despite his orders not to, Eri had gotten off the roof of the building and was staring at the continuing fight, frozen in fear. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Aizawa turned, eyes growing wide as Eri ran into the fight. She was yelling something, arms stretched out, and eyes focused on a rooftop. There was a flash of silver, a gun pointing at All Might. Aizawa yelled, trying to get All Might to move. For her to stop. For something to happen. But the girl threw herself in front of All Might as Overhaul sent out a spike to stop her. The rock snagged her dress, ripping it, but she continued in her trajectory. Right in front of All Might. A bullet hit her in the shoulder, and she tumbled to the ground, lying in a heap. Aizawa's breath caught. The girl was gone. But lying on the ground was a small boy. Green hair covered his face, but Aizawa knew that green eyes were hidden underneath. Overhaul and his thug had stopped, staring in disbelief at the child curled up and clutching his shoulder. Realization dawned in Overhaul's eyes and he growled, "Hey! Where is she?" The boy coughed, tilting his head up to look at the villain. He smiled. "She's somewhere. Safe. I won't let you hurt her or All Might." All Might looked stricken. "Little one." Overhaul's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over." Turning, he ran down an alley, his thug following. "Eraser, take care of the boy," All Might yelled as he followed in pursuit. Aizawa ran to the boy. To Deku. He was laying on his side and breathing heavily. His hand cupped his shoulder, but blood was seeping out. As Aizawa approached, he turned, his green eyes meeting Aizawa's black. "Hi, again, Eraserhead. Are you okay?" From beneath his goggles, Aizawa's eyes were shiny. "Yes, kid. I'm fine." The boy smiled a smile that would rival All Might's. "Good," he whispered, and his eyes slipped close. It was gray, and not a sliver of the sky was visible as Uraraka made her way to UA. It was depressing, but it fit her mood. The mood she had been in ever since she met with Deku last night. She had known subconsciously, the moment she saw Eraserhead, that things wouldn't be the same. Even if Eraserhead wasn't looking for Deku, Toshi, and A, even if he didn't remember her voice, there was still the possibility. If it came out that she was involved in the kidnapping of a pro-hero, she could be expelled. Her parents would be heartbroken and her dreams would be destroyed. It would bring unwanted attention to Deku and the gang, the very attention they were trying to avoid. She fought back her spilling tears. It was for the best that they didn't have contact. She sniffled, even if it was painful. Her head hung as she walked. At least the sidewalk was interesting, trod on bubblegum and spidering cracks. Cracked and crumbling like her. She hadn't even been able to say goodbye to Toshi and Eri. "Ocha," Toshi hissed. Uraraka startled. Her eyes shot up to see Toshi in an oversized sweatshirt, the hood tugged up over his head, shielding his eyes. He peered at her from underneath it, his eyes underlined in purple circles. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. Eri was to his side, head ducked, and a hat pulled low on her face. She was squeezing Toshi's hand and huddling into his side. "Toshi? I don't. What are you doing here? We need to talk." He grabbed her school jacket, dragging her along as they ducked into a manga cafe. Pulling her through the packed shelves, he ignored her protests, diving deeper into the maze of books. Finally, secluded in the back, he stopped, behind a shelf. His eyes glanced around the cafe, glaring at every customer. He had positioned himself to have a clear view of the cafe but remain hidden. Toshi, what's going on? I thought when I talked to Deku yesterday he dash. You talked to Deku? When? Ocha blinked, looking closer at Toshi. He was upset. The most upset she had ever seen him. His hair was everywhere and his eyes were in constant movement. They were frantic, jolting around, checking every inch of the room before darting back to her. Eri wasn't much better. She was hunched, gripping Toshi's hand and leaning into him. As though the other would disappear if they let go. Her stomach turned. Deku's missing. Isn't he? Toshi's face fell. Turning his head, she watched as he swiped an arm across his eyes. Yes. Uraraka gripped her jacket. I saw him last night. I dropped by right after school and stayed for an hour. I found out Eraserhead is my homeroom teacher and was freaking out. We talked and he said that to be safe we should keep some distance for at least a couple of weeks. I left not long after and I haven't seen or heard anything from him since. Toshi ran a hand through his hair, gripping it a little harder than necessary. I was afraid of that. His voice came out as a croak. What happened? When did he disappear? Overhaul found us last night when I was out scavenging. Deku told Eri to hide as we had planned. And he took the role as the decoy, she whispered in horror. Yes. Uraraka jumped. Wait. Toshi? Have you seen the news today? Toshi gave her a look. No. Why? She wrung her hands together. I forgot, but All Might got in a fight with some villain last night. They didn't mention a name, but he had a bird mask and was shooting chunks of concrete. Eri stiffened. She hadn't looked at Uraraka once, but at the mention of the villain, her eyes jolted up. Overhaul, she whimpered. Toshi pulled her closer but was looking at Uraraka desperately. What did it say? Did it mention Deku? She shook her head. No. In fact, for an All Might fight it had very little news coverage. Typically something like that is all reporters will talk about. But they didn't even mention who won or what the fight was about. And there was no mention of Deku, was there? No. Eri trembled. I should have just gone with him. It's my fault. If I had just gone, Deku wouldn't be missing. No, Eri, Toshi snapped. She flinched at Toshi's sharp voice. Deku agreed to this plan. We all did. You will not go back. We'll go to one of our safe houses in the city and wait. Deku will show up. His voice cracked slightly. He has to. Toshi pulled his hood farther down on his face. Thanks for the help, Ocha. We'll see what we can find out about the fight. I'm sorry. Uraraka cried. Toshi flashed a small, sad smile. So am I. And tugging on Eri, the two of them crept out of the cafe and slunk out onto the busy street. The kid was still sleeping. And Aizawa was still there, watching him. It had been a long night, but now the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, scattering rays of light. The beams were sneaking through Yue's infirmary window, highlighting the sleeping boy. Deku was sleeping, lying on the infirmary bed, his pale face blending in with the white sheets. He looked dead, but the gentle rise and fall of his face stated otherwise. Aizawa leaned forward in his chair, observing the boy closer. He had gone over his memory of his kidnapping time and time again, trying to remember and preserve every detail of the encounter and the children. But it was different in person. The boy was smaller than he had remembered. It was as if he had gotten younger since he last saw him. In the middle of his kidnapping, Deku had seemed confident and full of life, an obvious leader. But laying in the infirmary bed he looked so small and vulnerable. It felt as if a single touch would leave the boy cracked and shattered. Did you get any sleep at all last night? Recovery girl asked, irritated. She strode over to the bed, followed by a skinny All Might and Principal Nezu. I got some, Aizawa said, lifting up his sleeping bag as proof. She hump-fed and glared at All Might. See, he listens to me. He rests even when he's worried instead of running his body into the ground every single time. All Might rubbed his neck sheepishly. Now Chio, let's not be too upset, Nezu said. I for one am curious to see how our young patient is doing. He scurried over to the bed, appraising the child. Has he shown any sign of waking up at all, Aizawa? No. Recovery girl walked over, checking the boy's vitals. I'm not surprised. The boy is clearly undernourished for his age and didn't have a lot of spare energy to begin with. I'm afraid in healing him my quirk wiped him of his energy completely. He'll wake up, but not for several more hours. She sighed and walked over to the cabinet to gather supplies. It may be for the best, said Nezu. I have still been unable to identify the boy or find any information on him. Really? All Might asked, his eyes wide with surprise. Nezu's failure to find information was a rare occurrence. Well, that will make Tsukochi happy. I asked him if he could dig up any information, but he didn't have any luck either. Aizawa leaned back. Tsukochi? As in Detective Tsukochi? Yes. He's a friend of mine. And one I trust. Aizawa shook his head. He's a good detective. I've worked with him on cases in the past. If neither he or Nezu could find any information, then I'm not sure who can. It is a dilemma to be sure, Nezu said. And one that we may have to wait to solve. At least until Deku wakes up. All Might sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I just wish there was something we could do now. The boy is incredibly brave. Or incredibly stupid, Aizawa bit back. All Might had the audacity to look hurt. Recovery Girl wandered back over to Deku, clean bandages in hand. Stop bickering you two, she said, taking off the boy's wrappings to check the wound. Although I am personally inclined to agree with both of you. Nezu's ears twitched with amusement. How so? Jumping in front of a bullet is never a wise thing to do. The boy could have been seriously hurt. She ran her fingers over the skin where the bullet had penetrated. The skin was pink and shiny, there would be a scar. But, she added, I've sent the bullet off for analysis. It's still early on, but it's looking like it was no normal bullet. It was filled with some foreign material. Are you saying it was poisoned? Aizawa growled. Recovery Girl shook her head and began wrapping Deku's arm. Again. No, I don't think so. Or at least I have found nothing that I can trace in the boy's system. But that doesn't mean that it had no effect, Nezu said. Recovery Girl nodded. It's worrying, to say the least. She gave All Might a stern look. It's very likely the boy saved your life. All Might wrung his hands, mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. I understand, he finally said, his face downcast. Nezu placed a paw on Deku's still fingers. For right now, there is very little we can do. We will get more information when Deku wakes up. But until then, we wait. Nezu turned to All Might. You'll be informed when he wakes up, but class is starting soon and your lesson plan still needs completing. All Might ducked his head. Yes sir, and left the infirmary, but not before sending a regretful gaze at the boy. Aizawa. Aizawa sat up. The principal was fixing him with a stern gaze. I know this situation is a sensitive one for you, but you need to stay focused. Your students need you. He sniffed. I will continue to look for information. I know that you were able to identify one of the children. Yes, Shinso Hitoshi. I will do some digging from that end to see if I can find any information as well. And as I told All Might, you will be informed when he wakes up. Aizawa nodded, getting to his feet. It was logical. He couldn't argue with it, but maybe he could tweak it. Sir, with your permission, I'd also like to speak with Okiko Uraraka about Deku as well. Nezu's eyes glinted. You believe she was involved in your kidnapping? Aizawa fought back a wince at the blatant reminder but nodded. Possibly. I would like to speak with her after homeroom. Bring her to see Deku. He shot a gaze at the sleeping boy. It's just to see if I can get any more information. Nezu hummed. I don't see any issue with it, but as he is Chiyo's patient, I will only agree if she does. The older woman scowled. She had finished wrapping Deku's arm minutes ago and was now standing to the side listening to the conversation. I don't have any issue with it as long as you don't disrupt the boy. Nezu smiled. Wonderful. Permission granted. Now hurry on out of here, Recovery Girl said. Your classes start soon and you could use a shower and a change. She pointed towards the corner. You know where the bathroom and your clothes are. Go on. Aizawa stood up. It was useless fighting the old lady, something All Might had yet to figure out. It was just better to do as she said. He gave one final glance at the little boy, still laid out sleeping. Please be okay, kid, he thought. MIC. I'd like to speak with Uraraka for a moment. Present MIC glanced up from the podium to look at Aizawa standing in the doorway. Hey! Aizawa flashed him a look. MIC's eyes widened. Oh, he said knowingly with an awkward grin. Right. She's all yours. Uraraka stood up at her desk. Aizawa hadn't said anything in homeroom this morning. So why was he calling her out? Now? Ida gave her a sympathetic look as she snuck around desks, making her way to the door. Aizawa was expressionless, but his flat eyes reminded her of a shark, tracking its prey. She shivered. With a tilt of his head and a grunt "come," she trailed after him. Had he figured out her connection? She didn't think she had done anything that would have given her away. Or was it school-related? Had she messed up worse than she thought in yesterday's battle training with All Might? But he had given his criticism at the beginning of homeroom. The anxiety churning in her stomach grew worse when they passed the teacher's lounge and spare classrooms. Where were they going? If Aizawa was aware of her growing fear, he didn't say anything. Only continuing towards his destination. Finally, he stopped. Right outside of the infirmary. Uraraka tried to smile, but even she could hear the fear in her voice. Mr. Aizawa? Why are we here? The hero just stared at her, before walking in. There's someone I want you to see. The infirmary was quiet. The beds were empty, with crisp white sheets pulled tight across. Towards the back of the room, one bed had a curtain pulled around it, but there were no sounds or movement. There appeared to be no patients were in there. Recovery girl was sitting on a stool, scribbling something at her desk. But as they drew closer, she immediately stood, getting in Aizawa's path. He's still asleep. But I expect you to call me if there is any movement at all. Aizawa nodded. Recovery girl sighed, picking up her cane and giving Uraraka a gentle pat on her arm. It'll be okay, dearie. And with that, she left the room, the door clicking behind her. Mr. Aizawa. He held up a hand and motioned for her to follow. Stopping by a bed that was separated by the curtain, he turned to face Uraraka. Then with painful slowness, he raised his arm and threw open the curtain. Uraraka gasped. It was Deku. He was laying there, in the same clothes she had seen in him yesterday. The old shirt that was creased with grime and grease from his fiddling and oversized jeans. His eyes were closed and she could see the faint freckles that were on his chubby cheeks. Her legs turned to jelly and she stumbled over towards the bed, her hand falling to touch his arm. The anxiety that had been churning in her stomach melted away at the sight of him. He was safe, Toshi would be so relieved. Deku was safe and at UA. Deku was at UA. With Eraserhead. Who knew who she was? Uraraka's hand slipped off of Deku's arm and returned to her side. Biting her cheek, she turned back towards her teacher. He had been watching her reaction the entire time. There was no hiding now. How long have you known? I know now. I suspected it since the first day of school. Uraraka balled her hands into fists. Am I going to be expelled? Aizawa pulled out a chair and sat down, facing Uraraka. That depends. Are you going to talk? Uraraka stared at the ground. She had talked to Deku about this. Last night. What to say if Eraserhead confronted her? Deku had asked her to keep Eri's quirk, and his lack of quirk a secret. As well as his true age. The rest he was okay with her sharing. Uraraka sat down on the bed next to Deku, looking at his sleeping face. His shoulder was wrapped in a white bandage, but she couldn't see any blood seeping through. Is he going to be okay? He'll be all right. We were able to get him to Recovery Girl and she healed him up. It just exhausted him, so he's sleeping it off. Uraraka looked at her teacher in the eye. He was watching her, arms crossed and face expressionless, waiting. Uraraka's hand crept back over to Deku's wrist. It was grounding, just being able to touch him. To feel his warm skin and heartbeat. She could do this, she'd be honest, but do as Deku asked. She could be brave like him. I can only tell you so much. They are distrustful of outsiders. Especially Toshi. She snorted, He had taken forever to warm up to her. Aizawa nodded. How did you meet them? I found them camping out at one of my parents' construction sites. My dad had asked me to go and grab some paperwork from the office. That was when I saw them huddled in the building. It wasn't the first time we had homeless people camping out there, but it was the first time that they had been kids my age. Her voice quieted. It was shocking. Why didn't you involve the police or heroes? I wanted to. But I was worried about them. And they were so slow to trust me. They were wary of the police and any adult interference. I knew if I went to the police they would disappear and I would be unable to help. So I did it their way. I helped them find a place they could stay, an abandoned gas station, and I kept in touch. I brought food when I could. Did what I could to help. But you still didn't go to the police. They would have been separated and put in foster care and ended up running away. Or that's what they thought. They said there was a reason they were on their own. Her hand tightened on Deku's wrist, and her eyes began watering. They've been mistreated by society. I've heard what they've gone through, how they've been treated and let down over and over. They asked me to prove that things would be different this time, and I couldn't. I couldn't promise that they would stay together and things would be all right. She choked on the last word and tore her gaze from Aizawa. Glancing around the room, she tried to distract herself. There was an open window and a small nightstand next to Deku's bed. Aizawa's hero costume was thrown on a chair in the corner. It was peaceful. But it didn't change the fact that Deku was hurt. Her voice cracked. They said things would be alright. But things aren't alright. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, because Overhaul is looking for them. Uraraka nodded. He's after Eri. I don't know the whole story. Deku and Toshi had a hard enough time getting any details from Eri about it. But I do know that he was experimenting on her. Aizawa buried his face in his capture weapon. His eyes were closed, but she could hear his jaw creaking. His stuffed in his crossed arms, she could see his hands trembling. She had thought her teacher was scary on the first day of class, but it was nothing compared to the terror she felt now. It was nothing compared to the feeling radiating from him. It was terrifying. It was fury. It was cold, sharp anger that left Uraraka trembling. His eyes snapped open, and for a brief moment, they were glowing red. Then he blinked and the feeling dissipated. Her expressionless teacher was back. Hesitant, Uraraka continued, Deku and Toshi rescued her, but they've been on the run since. Do they know why Overhaul wants her? He's making something using her. Aizawa's eyes flashed over to Deku. A bullet? He asked grimly. Uraraka blinked. Yes. How did Yo dash? Deku was shot with it. Do you know what it does? Uraraka's hand tightened around Deku's wrist. They were getting into sensitive topics now. She would have to choose her words carefully. I know it has something to do with her quirk, but they didn't talk much about it. Quirks were a sensitive subject for them. They didn't like talking about it. She looked back at Deku's bandaged arm. How did he get shot? What happened? I found the little girl Eri running away from Overhaul. During the fight, a villain tried to shoot All Might. Uraraka jolted. If it was a quirk-erasing bullet, then no wonder Deku jumped in front of All Might. The hero would have been in big trouble if he had been shot. Aizawa continued, seemingly oblivious to her realization. She saw and jumped in the way of the bullet. It hit her shoulder, but at that moment she became Deku. It was only ever Deku. Eri was never there. It was part of a plan they made in case Overhaul found them. Deku knew that it was Eri that Overhaul wanted, so they found someone with an illusion-type quirk to disguise Deku as Eri. He was the decoy so that she could escape. Yes. I don't really know how it works. They didn't tell me much about it other than Deku had to wear the dress and it kind of embarrassed him. She paused. How did the fight end? After Deku was shot, and the illusion disappeared, Overhaul ran away. All Might didn't catch him. No, Aizawa's voice was sharp and cutting. And that is what I am concerned about. Overhaul is still out there. He leaned forward in his chair, his hands resting on his knees. Uraraka. This is important. Do you know where Toshi and Eri are now? Uraraka shook her head, staring at her feet. Aizawa continued, his stoic voice cracking slightly. I don't know if they've told you this, but they are in real danger. Overhaul is not just a run-of-the-mill villain. He is the leader of one of the few surviving Yakuza mob groups. He has the money and influence to track them down, and the fight with All Might made it clear that he has the power to as well. If we don't find them soon, they will die. Uraraka felt numb. She knew they were in trouble, but it had always seemed far off. But it was real. And Deku was lying in a hospital bed because of it. Uraraka. Aizawa's voice called her attention back up to him. He was staring at her, but his eyes were softer now. Despite the dark circles and stubble, she could see a genuine concern. Do you understand? Uraraka nodded. Now, he glanced between her and Deku. Is there anything else I should know? Uraraka bit her lip and looked at Deku. She knew Deku and Toshi didn't want help, but if what Aizawa was saying was true, then they needed it. But she had promised Deku. And if she revealed his secrets, she squeezed her eyes close. She looked at Aizawa and she knew that the guilt she was feeling was plainly written on her face. Nothing that I can tell. You have to hear it from Deku. If I tell, he won't trust me and he won't trust you, and he'll run. It has to come from him. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak, letting her continue. Uraraka huffed, trying to find the words. Before I met them, I wanted to be a hero to provide for my parents so they wouldn't have to work so hard and sacrifice so much. But when I met them, it made me want to be a hero to help people. She felt a smile creep across her face. I look at Deku and he blows my mind. He's done so much to protect Eri and help Toshi, and he wants to help people. He's determined. His Dekiru can-do attitude. Uraraka took a deep breath, fixing Aizawa with a steely, determined gaze. She was channeling her inner Deku, her inner hero. Deku loves heroes. And he really respects you. Aizawa blinked at that, glancing over at Deku before looking back at her. Of the three of them, he'd be the easiest to convince. Just show him that he can trust you. That I can trust you. And he'll tell you what I can't. Aizawa sat there, face buried in his scarf and his hair hanging in his face. He didn't move. And he didn't speak. He stared at her, and Uraraka stared back, gaze still strong. This was the best she could do. She felt like she could trust the hero. That was why she said what she said. Thank you, Uraraka. He finally said. He stood up, dismissing her. You can go back to class now. Thrown off, Uraraka stumbled to her feet. She dropped Deku's wrist, and it bounced against the mattress. Can I see him when he wakes up? Aizawa didn't even look at her. Yes. She started walking away but stopped. Am I going to be expelled? For being there when? Did you know what they were doing? Aizawa was still not looking at her. No, not until you, were there. The girl, Eri. She can't control her quirk. His voice was flat and emotionless. No, that's why. Why what? Uraraka felt her mouth drop slightly. Was he just playing dumb? He had to know what she was getting at. Did he just want her to say it? She swallowed. Why they kidnapped you? Aizawa sighed and turned to her, sticking his hands in his hero outfits. Costume. To answer your question, no, I will not be expelling you. Uraraka jumped, but Aizawa continued. At least at this moment. But we will continue this conversation though in the future. You will also be starting remedial classes with me after school next week. We will be discussing how to properly handle these types of situations in the future. However, Aizawa's voice got an edge to it, the same edge when he had told the class he would expel whoever came last in the tests. If something like this ever happens again, I will not hesitate to expel you. Do you understand? Uraraka gulped. Yes, sir. Aizawa lifted a hand, half-heartedly shooing her. Now go back to class. I'll let you know when he wakes up. Uraraka nodded, scurrying out of the infirmary. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. I'm sorry, Deku, she thought, gripping her shirt. I hope I said the right things. It was too bright. Light was shining on his eyes, turning his inner eyelid a dark red. It was annoying and it was making it hard for Deku to stay in this comfortable sleep. Mumbling complaints, he turned and snuggled his face into the pillow to block it out. Eri must have gotten scared last night and turned on the lamp. She still had nightmares of Overhaul and her time with the shy Hasaikai. When that happened, he would turn on the lamp and hug her and tell her stories until she fell asleep again. He reached an arm out, feeling around for her. He thought he and Toshi made it clear that Eri was to wake them up if she had a nightmare. She had spent too many nights awake crying silently to herself. He pouted and weakly slapped the bed. The sheets were so smooth and silky. When had they gotten them? And where was Eri? He grumbled and buried his face deeper into the pillow. It was so soft and squishy. He didn't remember them ever being this soft. And besides, he never got the pillow. There were only two and Eri and Toshi always stole them. So why did he have the pillow? Where was Toshi? And Eri? What was going on? Pulling his face out of the pillow, he opened his eyes, blinking to try to see past the bright light. This wasn't their room. He was in an infirmary. It was simple, but the equipment and machines screamed money. He scrambled up, rubbing his eyes, as if that would change his surroundings. He was in a bed, white sheets tucked up around him, with a curtain drawn around him, hiding his view. The stand next to his bed had an abandoned half-eaten bento box sitting on it. Plucking out a rice ball, he popped it in his mouth before grabbing the pepper shaker. Twisting the lid off, and Deku dumped the contents into his pocket. It would work as a makeshift weapon. Drawing his legs up, he scooted over to the side, slipping off. His shoes were gone, and the tile was cold against his bare feet. A chair was tucked by the stand, a pile of clothes thrown on it in a messy pile. Picking up a black garment, he looked closer. Whoever these belonged to, they either didn't care about their appearance or... No, they didn't care about their appearance. Or how they smelled. Deku wrinkled his nose and tossed the jumpsuit back. There was another white clothing hiding in the jumpsuit. Grabbing an end, he tugged at it. A long blood-stained scarf snaked out, growing longer with every tug. This wasn't a normal scarf, this was Eraserhead's capture weapon. Head whipping from side to side he looked, but the underground hero was nowhere to be found. Where was he? He could hear someone humming a bright melody. They were being rather loud, even throwing in the occasional snap and oh. Not sure whether he should be amused or scared, Deku bit back a smile. Drawing the curtain aside, he peeped through the crack. Sneaking his head out more from behind the curtain, he searched for the source. Towards the side of the room, a leather-clad man leaned back in a chair, his eyes closed and headphones over his ears. Deku clapped his hands over his mouth, trying to stifle his gasp. It was Present Mic. He was easy to recognize with his slicked-back hairdo and bulky support piece on his neck. The hero was listening to something, judging by the jerking arm movements and head bobs. He was dancing, jamming out in his own world. Deku pressed his lips together to subdue his smile. Present Mic was just as much an eccentric entertainer outside the radio station. Closing the curtain, he snuck back to the bed, racking his brain. What had happened last? He had talked to Ocha, and then... His smile dropped. Overhaul had shown up. He remembered running away, drawing the villain away from the real Eri who was hiding in the garbage. The villain was yelling, and the bloodlust radiating off of him almost left Deku paralyzed with fear. It was dangerous. He had to run fast enough to stay out Overhaul's grasp, but close enough that the villain could still follow him. The dress was tangling up in his legs, but he was terrified of it taking any damage and the illusion shattering. In his haste, he stumbled into a wall and fell to the ground as Overhaul reached for him, murder in his eyes. And then there was something wrapped around his waist, and he was flying through the air. Right into the arms of the pro-hero they had kidnapped months ago. The rest of the fight was a blur, but he remembered standing on the street watching the heroes and villains. And then, from a rooftop, a glint of metal from a rooftop caught his eye, and he turned to see a gun aimed at All Might. At that moment Overhaul locked eyes with him, a knowing glint in his eyes. And Deku could tell that underneath the mask, the villain was smirking. Deku knew what was going to happen. He couldn't let it happen. And his legs moved. He was running. Sprinting towards All Might. He could hear people yelling, but it was pushed to the back of his brain. It didn't matter. All that mattered was getting to All Might. He jumped, his arms outstretched, and sharp pain in his shoulder sent him rolling to the ground. The heroes and villains were yelling, making so much noise, but all Deku could do was lay there. Clutching his shoulder, he could feel the warm blood oozing through his fingers. Eraserhead was crouching over him, checking him over. The hero looked worried. Deku smiled, and let the blackness consume him. Gingerly, Deku touched his shoulder. It didn't hurt at all, and he couldn't see any blood peeking through the white bandages. His shoulder was stiff, but that was all. He rubbed it, confused. Even if he had been asleep for several days, it shouldn't have healed. Healing quirks that powerful were rare. The only one he could think of off the top of his head was Recovery Girl. But she worked at UA. The same school Present MIC and Eraserhead worked at. Deku's eyes widened and he pressed his hands against his mouth. He was at UA. The school with the greatest hero program in Japan. The very school that All Might had gone to. Deku reached out a hand to steady himself, leaning against the bed. This was a dream come true. He was at UA. But, he realized, he shouldn't be here. He couldn't be here. He had to get back to Toshi and Eri. They had to be worried sick. And with Overhaul out there they would have to move again. They needed to get somewhere safe and far away from Overhaul. Deku nodded. He had to go. He hurried around the bed on tiptoes. Present MIC blocked his escape route, but there was another exit, an open window positioned conveniently by his bed. Peering out his escape route he bit his lip. He was 2 stories up, and the building was sheer glass. But sitting in that messy pile of clothes was his solution. Eraserhead's capture weapon. Hauling it up, Deku ran his fingers across the scarf. Parts were caked in dried blood that was starting to flake off. Had Eraserhead bandaged his shoulder with it? A chair scraped against the tile, and Deku froze. From across the room, he could hear Present MIC, standing up. His boots clamped against the tile and a door shut close. From the sounds coming behind a closed door, it sounded like the hero was using the bathroom. Sneaking out from behind the curtain, he hurried over to where Present MIC had been sitting. Deku rummaged through the drawers, grabbing medical supplies and stuffing them in his pockets. He didn't know if Eri and Toshi made it out unscathed, and the bandages might be useful. MIC's leather gloves had also been left on the desk. Deku slipped them on, the gloves flapping against his tiny hands. They didn't fit at all, but he just wanted some protection from friction burn. Scurrying back, he grabbed pillows off his bed before stuffing them under the sheets. It wouldn't fool them for long, but Deku didn't need long, just enough time to get off UA's grounds. Then he could easily disappear into crowds, making a clean escape. Heaving the capture weapon up onto his unbandaged shoulder, he dragged it to the window. It draped behind him as he struggled under the weight, but he managed to tie it to the bedpost. Tossing the capture weapon out the window, he watched it plummet towards the earth. Deku swallowed. Toshi would kill him if he ever heard about this stunt he was pulling. But he didn't have an option. Gritting his teeth, he pulled himself up onto the window sill. His hand shook and his stomach churned. It was a long way to fall. Taking a deep breath to center himself, he grabbed his makeshift rope and pushed off. Gripping the scarf tightly in his gloved hands, he tried to control his descent. His legs kicked as he tried to pin the rope between his feet to give himself an additional point of control. His arms burned and his gloved hands grew warm from friction as he slipped down towards the grass below. Finally, only a couple feet from the ground the scarf ended, and Deku tumbled to the ground. Panting on his hands and knees, he dug his hands into the grass. His arms shook and trembled from the strain of the descent. Deku whimpered softly. He was never doing that again. Stumbling to his feet, he shot a glance at the building. No alarms were going off, but that didn't mean no one had noticed. Turning abruptly, he took off running, his bare feet quiet against the grass. He just had to get to the gate. Aizawa fought back the urge to tap his foot against the ground. His class was so slow returning from hero training. Wandering behind him, laughing and giggling, still sweaty and dirty from the practice. All Might had asked him to sit in on today's hero training. He hadn't said why, but Aizawa assumed it was due to the train wreck that had been yesterday's hero training. The man may be the #1 hero, but he still struggled to put together a decent lesson plan and implement it. He didn't mind having to help out the hero, but it just had to be the day he had a hurt child sleeping in the UA infirmary. Hopefully, it would be fine. MIC had offered to watch over the kid while he was gone, so things couldn't be that bad. Still, Aizawa was itching to drop off the students and get back to the infirmary. All Might was supposed to do it, but the idiot had spent too much of his time limit, forcing Aizawa to take the class back. Slinking deeper into his capture weapon, he scowled. He'd be back quick enough. They were crossing the sidewalk going up to the locker rooms when a little ball dashed around the corner. Aizawa stopped, and the blur skidded to a stop. The class faltered, their conversations dying out as they watched the stare down. Aizawa's mouth opened but snapped shut. Because standing in front of him, chest heaving, was Deku. How did he get all the way out here? MIC was supposed to be watching him. Deku's bright green eyes widened, flicking around to take in Eraserhead and the class. He shifted, his bare feet scuffing the ground. Raising a hand, he gave a half-hearted wave. "A hi, Eraserhead," he squeaked. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. He could feel his forehead pulse with the beginning of a headache. Mr. Aizawa?" Kaminari piped up, "What's with the kid? Is he yours?" As though a dam had broken, the other students started shouting and shoving. Everyone was trying to get a look at the kid. Deku blushed, ducking his head and rubbing his arm. Aizawa ground his teeth. "No, he's not mine, but he dash." "Wait. Deku!" Bakugo shoved his way through the students and stopped, his jaw dropping. The whole class watched in interest as their most volatile student was rendered speechless. Deku's jaw had also dropped. "Kakken," he stuttered. Bakugo reared back in shock. The name definitely meant something. "It is you, Kakken." His eyes shined and he clapped his hands together. "You made it into UA. I always knew you would." He giggled nervously. "Your quirk has always been so strong. Have your explosions gotten stronger? I bet you can control them better now, maybe use them to maneuver around. That would be so useful. You wouldn't be able to fly, but by producing a series of consecutive explosions you probably could get dash." Bakugo swore loudly, and Deku flinched. So sorry, I didn't mean to dash." Aizawa stepped in, interrupting both his student and the young boy. He would sort out this mess later. Quirk activating, his hair rose off his shoulders and his eyes flashed red. "First things first. What are you doing out of bed?" The boy flinched again, taking a hesitant step back. Well, you see, I'm all good," he said, rotating his shoulder. "And I'm really thankful for your help, but I thought I would just head out." His voice trailed off and he started inching away. Aizawa snapped, throwing out his capture weapon. The scarf cocooned the boy and launched him towards Aizawa. Hoisting the boy up in the air, he held him at eye level. The boy's eyes were wide as he wiggled. "Pee-pee please, Mr. Eraserhead, I'm sorry." Deku kicked his legs, eyes watering. His lip trembled, he was seconds from a full-on meltdown. "Please let me go." From behind, his students murmured complaints, but they didn't interfere. They knew better than to mess with their teacher. Especially with his quirk activated, and his ire apparent. Aizawa felt his heart twinge sympathetically, but this was likely just an act. The kid was smart, he had outwitted him and a villain. Tears were not going to let him escape. "You're not going anywhere, kid." The boy sighed, going limp in the bonds. "Yeah, I thought you'd say that." He wiggled again, his hands slipping into his pockets. "Sorry about this, Eraser." With his eyes still wide open from erasure, he was completely unprepared. A hand snuck out of the bonds and tossed something into his eyes. His eyes burned and watered. Swearing, Aizawa clutched his eyes, trying to blink past whatever had been thrown in it. Through his tears he could see Deku squirming, managing to slip out of his capture weapon. "Sorry, Eraser." The brat yelled, taking off down the sidewalk in a sprint. Swearing again, Aizawa threw out his capture weapon, hoping to snag the kid. But with his vision watering and burning, he missed. Rubbing at his eyes, he swore again, before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a phone. Straining to see through his tears, he pressed a button and started talking. "Nezu, the brat's gotten out and is going for the gate." "I'll alert the teachers," Nezu said, a little too cheery. "He won't get far." Deku's chest was heaving. gasping and begging for more air. But he couldn't stop. If only he hadn't run into Eraserhead. He felt bad about throwing pepper in the hero's eyes, but he wasn't going to let him go, and Deku needed to get to Toshi and Eri. Even if that meant that he now had a ticked-off pro hero after him. The thought spurring him on, Deku sprinted around the corner. His heart soared. There it was. The legendary UA gate. He just had to make it through and he'd be free. Eyes focused on the buildings past the gate, he stumbled to a stop in horror. Metal wall after metal wall slammed across the UA gate, creating an interlocking barrier. He was trapped. Eyes whipping to the side, he darted towards the wall. If he could climb over it, everything would be okay. He could do it, he could. Crash right into a concrete wall that had appeared out of nowhere. He fell to the ground, head reeling. Where had the wall come from? Walls don't appear from anywhere. Calm down, kid, came a calm rumbling voice. Stumbling to his feet, Deku faced the two heroes caging him in. His stomach plummeted. The stony square-faced man could only be Cementos, and the woman with a whip had to be Midnight. One hero to corner him and cage him in, the other to knock him out. He was screwed, but he still ran. Cementos placed his hands on the ground, summoning concrete walls. No matter what direction Deku ran, a wall sprung up, blocking him. They were corralling him towards the two heroes. Frantically he clawed at the walls blocking him in, trying to climb up and over. His efforts became more and more panicked as he heard the two heroes walking closer. "Kid, it's okay. You're going to hurt yourself," Cementos said, raising another wall. Deku kept fighting, but purple mist crept across his line of sight. Midnight was using her quirk. Sking in a breath, Deku held it, his cheeks puffing out. He was going to fall asleep if he didn't do something soon. Dashing forward, he tried to shoulder past the heroes, making a break for it. But Midnight's whip wrapped around him, hoisting him up into her arms. Whimpering, he pushed and kicked, but the hero just shushed him. Pulling him closer to her chest, she released more and more of her somnambulist quirk. Deku fought, but with his face red and lungs screaming for air, he was forced to take a breath. The aroma worked fast, and he felt his eyelids begin to flutter close. His head was getting increasingly heavy and his limbs were turning numb. "It's all right, little one," the heroine whispered, guiding his head to her shoulder. "Sleep now." With one final burst on energy, Deku raised his hand, reaching for the gate, before falling. Completely limp. Aizawa paced in the infirmary, hands clenching and unclenching as Deku sat back in bed. He was covered in scrapes and scratches from his attempted escape. Recovery Girl was certain that he would bruise in places. The kid was smarter than Aizawa had given him credit for. Leaving his capture weapon by the bed, letting MIC watch the kid. He should have realized from his first encounter and the fight with Overhaul. This kid was far smarter than he let on. Aizawa rubbed his eyes again. The kid had to throw pepper in his eyes like they weren't abused enough from his hero work. He spent 5 nights in the bathroom, rinsing out his eyes, trying to get the burning sensation to go away. And despite that, they were still watering sporadically. He glared at the boy. This problem child. He couldn't even leave him for an hour without the boy getting into some trouble. He huffed and sat down on a chair. He wasn't leaving now until the boy woke up. A hand rested on his shoulder. Midnight had crept up behind him somehow, with present MIC following. Midnight grinned. "That boy is as clever as you said, Shouter." She patted his shoulder. "I knocked him out with my quirk, but it shouldn't last too long. He'll be up and causing you issues in about 30 minutes. Aizawa's shoulders relaxed slightly at the words. MIC stepped up next, wringing his hands. "I'm sorry, Sho, I didn't even hear him get dash." Aizawa flipped around, his quirk activated. MIC gulped and backed away. "You," Aizawa growled, pointing a finger. "You owe me coffee every day for the next month." MIC's hands flapped as he stammered out apologies. "And it better be the good stuff, from that cat cafe." "But Sho," MIC whined, "that's expensive." Aizawa's eyes flashed dangerously. "I had pepper thrown in my eyes." "You. Oh. Me. Coffee. And if not?" A grin slid across his face, and MIC shuddered. "Well then, you won't like the consequences." MIC whimpered, Nemirai, he's smiling at me. He hid behind the heroine, using her as a shield. Last time he smiled at me like that he hid plastic bugs in my coffee. Midnight patted Emissy, get him his coffee as you'll survive. She grinned at Aizawa. We'll leave you with him. Lunch Rush was planning on bringing some food for when the kid eventually wakes. Oh, and Nezu said to let him know the moment the kid wakes up. Aizawa grimaced, but nodded, turning back to the boy. Looks like Nezu was more interested in the kid than he thought. He crossed his arms and leaned back. Hopefully, the boy would survive the principal's attention. That was if he didn't kill him first. Aizawa sat in his chair, arms folded across his chest as he watched the boy lay quietly in the bed. It had been 40 minutes since Midnight knocked Deku out with her quirk, more than enough time for the boy to wake up. He was pretending at this point. I know you're awake, Aizawa said, not bothering to move from his position. Deku blinked and sat up, pulling his legs up towards himself. How did you know? Aizawa snorted. The kid's breathing had changed several minutes ago, no longer the deep breaths they had been. He had tried to cover it up, but Aizawa had been paying too close attention. I'm a pro hero, and your breathing changed. The boy pouted, his lips sticking out. I thought kept it steady. Not steady enough. Deku's pout became more pronounced, his nose wrinkling and forehead creasing. The spitting image of a whiny kid, fussing over a lost game. And yet, Aizawa thought, there was more to it. The kid was upset that Aizawa knew he was awake, but he was using it as a disguise or armor. The folded arms, the fussy face, were all part of an act he was putting on. It was a distraction from the kid's shoulders that were tense with worry. Or the way his eyes flicked around the room, looking for the exits. The boy was smart, and he used his innocent eyes and young face as a weapon. Drop the act, kid, Aizawa said, startling the boy, it's not fooling me. Surprised, Deku's eyes widened, then with a slight nod, the pout slipped off his face, leaving a serious, albeit worried, stranger in its place. His shoulders rolled back and his chin tilted up, as Deku defiantly stared back at Aizawa. Aizawa had to bite back a smirk. This was the kid he had been looking for. This was the real Deku. What do you want from me? Deku asked. Right now? I want you to eat, Aizawa said, gesturing to a tray set on the stand. Lunch Rush had brought it up 10 minutes ago. Recovery Girl had been very particular on Deku eating simple yet nourishing food. And the tray was a reflection of that. A bowl of okayu, still warm to the touch, topped with shredded salmon and green onion. This is for me? Deku asked, shocked as he looked at the meal. Yes. Eat. But you stole one of my rice ball from my bento box earlier. Don't lie and say you're not hungry, interrupted Aizawa. He could see how the boy was drooling from the smell of the rice porridge. The kid was hungry, but still, he persisted in questioning Aizawa. But don't you want to talk? We'll talk later, Aizawa said, his irritation beginning to show in his voice. Right now you are going to eat. Yes, sir, the boy mumbled. Cowed, he picked up the spoon and began to eat. With every bite though, he would glance at Aizawa, as if waiting for something. He probably could have been nicer, Aizawa thought, burying his head into his capture weapon. The kid put on a good show, acting tough and confident, but Aizawa could see the slightest tremor in his hands. It was slow, but finally, Deku had finished his food, setting his tray back down. Fidgeting with his hands, Deku looked back up at Aizawa. So what's next? That would be us. A voice said cheerfully, swinging the infirmary door open. Nezu padded in, headed straight for Duke's bed. Behind him, Recovery Girl followed, her face twisted in a scowl. All Might was also there, although in his skinny form. He stood hunched into himself as the three of them stopped at Deku's bed. Deku, he principal said, pulling himself up onto the bed. His tail flicked as he crept towards Deku before standing up and extending one of his paws. It's very nice to meet you. Deku was dead. Or at very least, he was in so much trouble. Eraserhead was intimidating, but the hero had his soft spots. But Principal Nezu? Deku fought back a shiver as he looked into the principal's blank black eyes. He was on a whole not her level. You couldn't manipulate him, you couldn't trick him, you couldn't escape. There was a reason he was so respected in the hero community. It was because you didn't mess with the mouse. And he was standing there on the bed, smiling at him, the grin pulling at the scar over his eye. Nezu looked without a care in the world, standing there with a paw outstretched. Hesitantly, Deku extended his hand, shaking the principal's soft, warm paw. Nezu's smile grew larger as they shook hands. "It is very nice to meet you," he said before sitting down on the bed, across from Deku. "Would you care for some tea, Deku?" Out of nowhere, the principal produced a pot of tea, pouring a steaming cup. "I hope you like ginger. It's not my personal favorite, but it is recommended during recovery," Nezu said as Recovery Girl hummed her approval. Deku reached out, clasping the cup in his hands. The hot steam wafted towards his nose, carrying the soothing sharp smell. Trying to be polite, he took a sip. The tea was perfect. Warm and soothing, it rested in his stomach, the heat spreading through his body. He could feel his whole body warming up, leaving him feeling content and secure. But Deku shook himself, his shoulders tightened. He couldn't relax, not right now. He still didn't know what they wanted or why he was here. Bringing the cup to his lap, he took a steadying breath. They were all looking at him. Nezu sat on the end of the bed, his grin glued to his face. Recovery Girl stood to the side, hands gripping her cane, as she frowned at him. And Aizawa, the sleep-deprived pro-hero, sat in his seat in the corner, his red eyes red from irritation. Deku did feel bad about the pepper. Lastly, an older man, one who Deku did not recognize, stood behind them all. He was skinny and tall, the skin drawn tight over his face. He looked like he had one foot in the grave, and yet his eyes glowed with a steady inner fire. But all four were staring at him, leaving Deku feeling like a bug under a microscope, studied and about to be pinned. None of them were saying anything, and Deku fidgeted in the silence. In the distance, he could hear scrapes, murmurs, and talk of students learning. He wished he could be there. Actually, he really wished to be anywhere but here, preferably with Toshi and A. Should he say something? They still weren't saying anything. Fidgeting with his cup, he tried to focus on the sheets underneath him. Ground himself, focus on now and speak. He tried to imagine the words forming inside, twisting, turning, bubbling. They were pushing at his lips, wanting to get out. He needed to only open up and speak. "What do you want with me?" Deku blurted out. "Am I going to jail?" The tall one spluttered, crimson blood dribbling out his mouth. Deku jumped. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, are you okay?" Frantically he patted around the bed, looking for something for the man. "A tissue or something? What did you give someone when they spewed blood? That wasn't normal, right? Blood was supposed to be on the inside. Was it part of a quirk?" Nezu chuckled and patted his knee. "It's all right. He's okay." Deku stopped. No one seemed too alarmed that the man had coughed up blood. Eraserhead was rolling his eyes, and Recovery Girl looked exasperated as she handed the man a tissue. Blushing, the man dabbed at the blood dribbling down his cheek. "Don't worry. This is normal for me." Nezu smiled, but that was an excellent thought, considering that it might be part of a quirk. Now it was Deku's turn to blush, sinking into himself. "I was speaking out loud, wasn't I?" "Yes, you were. But to answer your question, no, you will not be going to jail." Deku jumped, jostling his cup of tea. "What?" His eyes darted around, trying to analyze and understand. "But I borrowed Eraserhead, and threw pepper in his eyes. Isn't that illegal?" "Yes," Aizawa said. "But I didn't report the incident to the police, nor do I plan on doing so." However, his eyes flashed red and his hair rose. "Don't you ever throw something in my eyes again." "Got it?" "Yes." Deku squeaked. He bowed his head, rubbing a finger across the rim of his cup. Quietly he asked, "Then what do you want with me?" "We were wondering what you could tell us about the villain who was chasing you and the bullet you were shot with." Deku brightened. This made sense. He could help there. The villain was Overhaul. He's the leader of the Yakuza, Deku explained. His quirk, Overhaul, allows him to reconstruct and deconstruct any matter he touches. From my understanding, it only works through his hands, but he doesn't have to touch much. One finger will do it. He looked at Aizawa. That's why I was so worried during the fight. If either you or All Might had gotten touched, he could have deconstructed you. His voice trailed off. And you would have died. I understand that much, but why was he after you? Well, he wasn't really after me. He was after Eri. That little girl whose quirk you had me erase. Yeah, Deku said, retreating into himself. Why is he after her? Deku pressed his lips together, staring at the bed. Uraraka mentioned. Deku's head whipped up at hearing his friend's name. That Overhaul had been performing experiments on her. Can you explain? His arms trembled. He couldn't talk about Eri. He and Toshi had promised that they would take care of her and protect her. And they were asking about the experiments that Overhaul subjected her to. Deku curled into himself. He knew the body language he was broadcasting. Was upset and defensive, but he couldn't bring himself to care. Deku, Nezu said, laying his paws out, placating. We aren't asking to hurt her. But we are worried about Overhaul. Any information you give us can help us save lives. Deku rubbed his neck, pressing his eyes closed. Overhaul had been experimenting on her. He is messed up. Eri says that he thinks quirks are a disease and that he's trying to cure the world of them. Cure the world of quirks? But how? Asked the taller skeleton man. Deku blinked. I'm sorry, he said, but I just realized that I don't know who you are, and I don't know if I should talk. Not to worry, Deku, said Nezu. This is Mr. Yagi. He works as All Might's secretary and handles all of his daily affairs. The skeleton man, Yagi, coughed again. Yes, sorry about that. I should have introduced myself sooner. All Might was worried about your safety after the fight and asked me to check in. We should have brought that up sooner, but don't worry. You can trust Yagi and the rest of us with whatever information you give. Nezu added. Now please, you were explaining about Overhaul? Deku squirmed, placated for the moment. Overhaul has been making something. It's a drag that temporarily blocks someone's ability to use their quirk. Although I think he's been working on developing one that blocks it permanently. The bullet. Aizawa said, face darkening. That's what it was? Wasn't it? Yes. If All Might had gotten hit by it, he could have gotten killed. And I couldn't let that happen. The others stiffened, and the Yagi spewed blood again in shock. They hadn't realized how serious the situation was. All Might was the strongest man alive, and yet there was a drag out there that could render him helpless. The number one hero could have died and Japan would have lost their symbol of peace. The thought was sobering. But shaking himself, Aizawa continued, so you jumped in front of a bullet. Deku winced. He really hoped Toshi never heard about that. Yes. Then is your quirk back yet? Yagi asked. My quirk? Yes. You said that the drag was temporary, but how long does it normally last? Deku frowned. They thought he had a quirk. That meant they didn't know who he was or that he was quirkless. So then what did he say? No, the bullet didn't erase my quirk because I don't have one. I'm quirkless. But the words left a sour taste in his mouth. Quirkless. The word had haunted him for years now, following him like a curse. He had been kicked out of shelters, bullied at school, and discriminated against. All because of something he couldn't control. But these heroes thought he had a quirk. If they knew the truth, would they reject him too? He didn't know. For now, though, it might be easier to stay quiet. I think it normally lasts about 24 hours, but other factors could play into its duration. But what about your quirk? Deku grit his teeth. I'm fine. The bullet's effects have worn off. What is your quirk? It's an intelligence quirk. Isn't it? Deku squirmed, gripping the sheets. Can we talk about something else, please? Aizawa hummed, all right. Do you know how the drag is created? Deku's heart sunk. This wasn't any better. He didn't want to talk about this. He didn't want to talk about how the bullets were made with Eri's blood and sliced off flesh. Or how she had been cut open again and again, her body abused and hurt, only to be put back together. He didn't want this. He just wanted to go back to Toshi and Eri. Why am I here? Can I go? He said, placing his tea down on the stand. I need to get back. Deku? Nezu asked. No. I don't want to talk anymore. You know about the bullets now, his hands curled into fists. So can I please go? I need to get back. To Shinso, Hitoshi and Eri, Aizawa said. Deku reared back. He didn't want to talk about this. Please, can I go? Nezu frowned. I'm sorry to, but I cannot allow that. If what you said is true, then in good conscience we cannot allow you to go. The principal continued talking, words forming and spilling out. It was something about overhaul and school and safety, but the words washed over Deku. He was hearing them but not understanding them. His mind was stuck on the phrase, we cannot allow you to go, playing it over and over again. Aizawa was looking at him now, leaning forward in his chair, a concerned look on his face. But Deku couldn't do it. His heart was pounding and his nails were digging into his scraped hands. He couldn't do this. He couldn't speak. It was taking everything he had to not cry. Nezu was reaching for him now, paw outstretched, but Deku batted it away. He couldn't do this. He was on the verge of panic, trying to ride it out, anything. They continued to ask questions but Deku stayed quiet. He didn't want to talk. He just wanted to be back with Toshi and Eri. He just wanted to go. The heroes gave up when he wouldn't speak, filing out of the room. Recovery Girl stayed, checking over his bandaged arm, but Deku ignored her. Breathing was requiring all of his mental focus and energy. He just wanted to go. Uraraka stood outside the infirmary door, shifting from foot to foot. She needed to go in, but something was holding her back. Why was she so nervous? The door creaked open and Uraraka jumped back in shock as Recovery Girl walked out. Are you here to see him? She asked, gesturing inside. Uraraka straightened up. Yes. Can I go in? The older woman hummed. Yes, you can go in, just not for too long, dearie. I'll be in the teacher's lounge if you need anything. Uraraka smiled gratefully. The heroine was trying to give them some privacy to talk. But her smile turned into a frown. How bad had the conversation with the heroes gone? Taking a deep breath to steel herself, she opened the door. Deku? She asked, scanning for her friend. Towards the back of the room, Deku sat up in his bed, eyes frantically scanning for Ocha. Locking eyes with her, she saw his eyes widen. With relief. Ocha, he croaked. At that word all of her hesitations evaporated as she ran to him, tackling him in a hug. He was bawling now, streams of tears pouring down his face as he gripped her shirt, pulling her close. Sniffling too, Uraraka sat down on the bed next to him. Circling her arms around him, she tugged on him, pulling him against her chest. His arms were small and trembling, but he did his best to hug her back. His tears were getting her pristine uniform wet, but not a word was said as they sat and hugged for minutes. It was the most vulnerable she had ever seen her friend. She hadn't been there when Deku had made his mad dash for freedom. She had been back at Recovery Girl's temporary nurse station getting patched up. Her match with Kirishima hadn't gone so well. She had lost control of her quirk mid-flight and fallen, gashing her leg on a concrete wall. She might not have been there for Deku's escape, but she had heard all about it. Her classmates had swarmed her once she had gotten back, all talking about a little green-haired boy who had thrown pepper in Mr. Aizawa's eyes. She hadn't been allowed in to see him until after the heroes had gotten to talk to him. But judging by Aizawa's scowl, it hadn't gone according to plan. Sighing, she buried her face in Deku's fluffy hair, planting a kiss on the crown of his head. How was she going to help him? Giving her a tight squeeze, Deku moved away, wiping his eyes. What are you doing here, Ocha? Mr. Aizawa said I could come and see you when you woke up. She sniffled and grabbed a tissue from the stand, handing it to Deku. So he knows, he said, wiping his eyes. Ocha cracked a tired smile. Yeah. Guess he's better than we thought. Yeah. Deku stared at the soggy tissue in his hands. I just want to go, Ocha. I know, Deku. What do they want? He threw his arms open in frustration. I told them about the bullets and overhaul. Why can't I go? They're heroes, Deku. They want to help. But I told them what they need to know to help. I'm not needed anymore. Uraraka's heart twisted. Did he really not get what Aizawa wanted? She didn't trust her teacher completely, but he did seem to genuinely care about Deku and the others. Did Deku not see that? No, that's not it. They also want to help you. What? Deku's face twisted into one of shock and disbelief. Eraserhead has been looking for you ever since you kidnapped him. But that was 6 months ago. Deku said incredulously. I know. His forehead wrinkled, but why? Ocha's heart sunk again. How did he not get it? How did he not understand that there were people who wanted to help? How could she help him see? I mean, you're the one who analyzes heroes, Deku. You have that whole notebook. Why do you think? Well, Eraserhead is very rational. He has a strong sense of justice. Can have a bit of a temper, but hides it under indifference. Likes cats and children. Deku paused in his musings. Wait. Is it cause we're kids? Because I look like I'm 6? Ocha shrugged. Possibly. But come on Deku, you're the one who always says it. Heroes help people. I think he wants to help you. She sighed, rubbing her neck. Look, I don't know for sure. But I talked to him earlier. I didn't tell him anything you asked me not to, so he doesn't know you're quirkless, or that you're 15, and he doesn't know Eri's quirk. But I do think he just wants to help. And I think you should try talking to him again. Deku curled into himself, uncomfortable with the thought. Look, I just want you guys to be safe. I saw that fight with Overhaul on the news. Uraraka's voice cracked and she felt the familiar sting of tears in her eyes. It was scary, Deku. I was scared for you. All of you. Deku sniffed, eyes leaking again. Do you know if Toshi and Eri are okay? Yeah, they're okay. They cornered me on the way to school. But they're super scared, and they're looking for you. And the thing is, they were okay then, but Overhaul is still out there. Yes. Uraraka sighed, rubbing her neck. Look, I have always respected your guys' wishes about not going to the police or heroes. I did as you asked. But right now? I'm scared for you. You need help, you can't beat Overhaul on your own. Please, talk to Eraserhead. See what he says and what he wants, and then decide. She squeezed Deku. And no matter what you choose, I'll support you. Deku hugged her tightly. Okay, Ocha. Pushing away, he looked at her, concerned. Are you in trouble with him? Uraraka winced, thinking back on the awkward end to the conversation. Sort of. I'm not expelled, but I have remedial classes with him. To be honest, it could have been a lot worse. I got off easy. Good, he nodded to himself, thinking. Looking back up at her, Deku bit his lip. Can you do me a favor? Sure. Kaken. Can you talk to him for me? Deku asked. Kaken? Deku blushed. Oh, Katsuki. Katsuki Bakugo. Uraraka's jaw dropped. Bakugo. As in my classmate with the explosion quirk. Yes, Deku said. We were friends when we were younger and he recognizes me and he knows I'm quirkless. He'll know I'm not actually 6. And I don't know how much I want them knowing. I don't want Eri to get in trouble. Can you ask him to keep quiet? I'll talk with him and explain everything. Just for now. I need him to not say anything. Uraraka sighed. She had kind of hoped that Deku would tell Aizawa the truth about his age and his quirk. It felt wrong to hide it, and she had been hoping that Aizawa could do something to help Deku go back to his original age. But it looked like that might be too much to hope for in the beginning. Okay, Deku. I can do that. Thank you, Ocha. Kaminari could not write an essay, Aizawa thought sourly, marking yet another inaccuracy. He might need to pull the kid in for remedial classes if this continued. He'd have to continue to watch him and his progress. Kaminari's quirk was strong, but that didn't mean he could take on villains and not get killed. Aizawa couldn't afford to slack off in training him. Because ultimately he would be responsible for the boy getting hurt. Like Deku. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose, trying not to think of the green-haired boy in the infirmary. He needed to focus on grading these papers, his students would be asking about them soon. Circling the score at the top of the paper, he set it aside, reaching for the next. Okako Uraraka. She had gone into the infirmary not too long ago, wanting to check up on Deku and see how he was doing. Hopefully, she could help calm the boy down. He glanced at the bottom of his computer screen, checking the time. It had only been 20 minutes. The kids were fine. Hey Eraser? You doing alright? Aizawa glanced up. MIC was leaning back in his chair, headphones pulled down, grinning nervously. You've been glaring at that paper for the past couple of minutes. I'm fine, Aizawa grumbled, turning his attention back to the paper to mark a mistake. From the corner of his eye, he could see how MIC and Midnight were passing worried looks. He glared, pushing down a little harder than needed, making a small rip in the paper. The teachers sitting in the lounge winced at the sound, threw themselves back in their work. Not wanting to give him a target for his obvious frustration, Aizawa grimaced, tossing the pen to the side and let out a sigh. Fine. He was worried. The conversation hadn't gone as he wanted. The boy had somehow thought he was going to jail. Shoving his chair back, he walked over to the coffee machine, ignoring the eyes following him. Jamming the button, the coffee dripped into the cup, filling up. He could have handled the conversation better. The kid was like 5. And they had brought in a bunch of adults, asking questions that made him uncomfortable. Any kid would be uptight with that many adults surrounding them. Even if Deku had an intelligence quirk, it didn't mean that he wasn't sensitive to such situations. The coffee stream stopped and Aizawa picked back up his coffee mug, going back to his desk. Yagi was sitting over at his desk, looking glumly at his computer. He was obviously feeling bad about the conversation too. Aizawa flopped back down. But even though the kid had been outnumbered, he had still opened up. Things had been going fine, Deku had been talking, and then he shut down, refusing to speak. Slinking down into his capture weapon, Aizawa sipped his coffee. What did they do that set Deku off? Or actually, what did they ask? A couple of the questions had bothered Deku. The boy had hunched into himself and avoided answering. Aizawa took another sip. What were those questions? The coffee caught in his throat and he choked, setting the mug back down on the desk. He was an idiot. Uraraka had mentioned what topics were sensitive for Deku. The kid's quirk and Eri. He should have known better than to press. He had been so eager for information that he had destroyed any potential trust between him and the kid. He groaned into his hands. He messed up. A hesitant knock at the door to the teacher's lounge jolted him out of his worry. Yagi grimaced and exploded outward into his All Might persona. He was just in time, as the door swung open and Uraraka stepped in. She beelined straight to Aizawa's desk but stopped a respectful distance away. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Uraraka rolled her shoulders back and looked him in the eye. He said that he'll talk to you, but only you. From across the room, All Might coughed in surprise, his perma smile tightening. Nodding, Aizawa stood, walking out the teacher's lounge. He was being given a second chance, and he wondered why. Uraraka followed behind him. Mr. Aizawa? Yes, he said, turning with his hand resting on the infirmary handle. He doesn't know what you want. Aizawa frowned. What do you mean? Uraraka's hands curled into fists. You want to help him, right? That's why you're doing this. Aizawa stopped. Why was he so concerned with this boy? Deku was just one child among so many, and yet. The boy reminded him of Shirakumo, his long-dead friend he still mourned for. He reminded Aizawa of wet kittens in damp boxes, mewling from the cold. People and creatures suffering silently and ignored. He saw that in Deku. He was a kid with too much on his back, but still trying to carry the weight of the world. He didn't want Deku and the others to suffer alone anymore. He wanted to help him. Aizawa gave a small nod, answering Uraraka's question. Uraraka looked pleased with his answer. She gestured to the door. Well, he doesn't understand that. And doesn't understand what that means. To be helped. She huffed and wrapped her arms around herself. That's all I wanted to say. It went unspoken, as she walked away, that he was being given a second chance, so don't blow it. Pushing the door open, Aizawa walked in. School had ended not too long ago, so the infirmary was empty. Recovery girl was still absent, trying to give privacy. They weren't too concerned about escape attempts. Deku seemed smart. He had to know he wouldn't be able to make another break for it. He would bet his sleeping bag that Nezu was watching the cameras like a hawk. The rodent lived off information. Walking over, Aizawa stopped right in front of the bed, looking Deku in the eye before lowering into a deep bow. He could hear Deku gasping, but Aizawa didn't move from his position, eyes focused on the ground. "I would like to apologize." Deku stammered, but Aizawa kept his forehead down. "The way you have been treated has not been becoming of us as heroes. We should have been more clear about our intentions." He could hear Deku swallow, murmuring under his breath, "Can you accept my apology?" There was a long silence, but Aizawa stayed in his bow, even as his back began aching. He owed the boy this. Finally, Deku whispered, "It's okay, you don't need to apologize. I should apologize to you for the pepper." Aizawa smirked from beneath his hair. He was still irritated about the pepper, but he had to admit the stunt was clever. If it had been at anyone other than him, he would have been impressed. "You're fine. I should have handled it better." Deku smiled nervously and gestured to a chair. "Would you like to talk?" 2 hours later. The air oozed, the odd smell of disinfectant trying and failing to mask human waste. Even though the water treatment plant was a block away, it was difficult to ignore. The smell of rotten eggs could be tasted in every breath, nauseating and bring an urge to GG. Aizawa was walking behind Deku, showing no obvious signs of being bothered by the smell. But he had buried his head deep in his capture weapon so that only his eyes could be seen peeking out of his hair. He seemed nonchalant, but Deku could see how Eraserhead was on edge. Closely following behind Deku the moment they left the car, his body tense and eyes roaming the street. But whenever the hero caught Deku looking at him, he would slump into his scarf, feigning nonchalance. Deku turned back and flashed a small smile. "Don't worry about Overhaul. I don't think he's going to show up." Eraserhead's forehead narrowed, a little doubtful. Deku pointed around, his nose wrinkling up. "It's because we're next to a sanitation facility. I know it smells bad, but Overhaul is a huge germaphobe. He would have a very difficult time coming here." Eraserhead nodded, a flash of respect in his eyes. Wordlessly he continued following Deku up towards the abandoned warehouse. Squeezing through a gap in a link fence, he to watch Eraserhead. The hero took a few steps back and then launched himself up and over, landing quietly on the ground. Deku had to bite his lip to muffle his excited giggle. Eraserhead was so cool. Leveling a flat stare at Deku, the hero gestured for Deku to continue on. Deku nodded before hurrying around the building to a propped open window. Scrambling, his feet scraping against the wall, he hoisted himself up and through, landing in a heap on the floor. Eraserhead sighed but followed suit. "Toshi!" Deku called, beginning to walk around the maze of abandoned crates. "Toshi! It's me, Deku. Are you here?" Deku wandered deeper into the maze, Eraserhead only a few paces behind. This was the right place? Right? Toshi and Eri wouldn't have left already? Would they? "Toshi!" he yelled, hating the hysteria that was creeping into his voice. "Toshi, where are you?" "What do you want?" a low voice asked, echoing in the warehouse. Deku spun around, getting onto his tiptoes, trying to see something, anything. The stacks of crates made it difficult to see more than a couple of meters ahead. "Toshi? Is that you, Toshi? Where are you? I can't see you." "What do you want?" the question came again. "Toshi?" Deku asked, brow scrunching in confusion. "What do you dash? Not you, Deku!" Toshi yelled. Deku stumbled back, his mouth snapping closed. "What dash?" Eraserhead, the name said in a growl. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, and his hand crept towards his scarf. Deku looked at Aizawa with a helpless shrug, as he craned his neck, looking for Toshi. "Why are you here, hero?" "I dash." The second the syllable was uttered, Deku saw Aizawa's eyes drain of any life and color. His arms fell limply to his side, as he stared off into the distance. Brainwashed. Deku was yanked from his shock by a hand on his arm, dragging him away. Thrashing, he instinctively tried to pull away, his arm slipping out, only for his wrist to be grabbed. "Stop, Deku!" Deku froze, shaking out of his panic. Toshi! Toshi growled again, tugging on Deku's wrist. Yes, idiot. Who else? Deku beamed, tears welling up in his eyes. Toshi was okay. He sniffled. I don't know, you just appeared out of no dash. Yes, I know, Toshi said impatiently. Now come on, Deku. We need to go. Toshi said, tugging on his wrist. No, wait. Deku said, turning back towards Eraserhead, who was still standing still. We can't go. You brainwashed Eraserhead. I know, and it's only going to last so long. But Toshi, I dash. Toshi ignored him, keeping his grip tight on his wrist, dragging him across the floor. Deku's shoes squeaked as he pressed his feet against the floor, trying to stop. Toshi! Listen to me. Shocked by Deku's yelling, Toshi stopped, spinning around to face Deku. What? What is so important? Do you not see the pro-hero, right here? Toshi, Deku said, putting a hand on Toshi's arm. I know. I brought Eraserhead here. What? Toshi whispered. His eyes were wide and darting around, trying to understand what Deku was getting at. Toshi! Deku sighed. We can't keep running. Overhaul is going to catch us. Eraserhead said that we can stay with him until the heroes catch Overhaul. Toshi dropped Deku's hand like it had burnt him, clutching it to his chest. You did what? What? You brought a pro-hero here. He glared at Deku. What were you thinking? I thought you were smarter than that. Toshi, we don't have any other options. The dress got ripped when I was running away. It's useless now and Overhaul won't fall for it again. Toshi swore. There are always other options. It's not safe. We don't know that we can trust them. Why were you even with them in the first place? They interfered when Overhaul was chasing me. I probably would have died if it wasn't for them. They even healed me when I got shot. I know you don't like this dash. Toshi's face went slack, horror creeping up into his eyes. What? What? You said that you got shot? Toshi's voice became strangled. Deku ducked his head. Yes. They were about to kill All Might and I didn't see another option. I promise I didn't mean to, Toshi, my legs just moved on their own. Toshi held up a hand, let me see. Deku bit his lip but pulled down his shirt, showing the circular, puckered scar on his shoulder. Leaning down, Toshi ran a finger across the pink, mangled skin. Deku shuddered but stayed still. Toshi's eyes narrowed, his mouth screwing into a grimace. Look, I know you don't want to do this, but I can't think of any other way to keep Eri safe. If Overhaul shows up again, we won't have anything ready. Toshi ran a hand over his face. You always come up with something, Deku. Don't give me that excuse. But what if I don't, Toshi? What if I can't come up with a plan and Eri gets hurt? We have several safe houses but nothing that is long-term. Eraserhead knows who Ocha is, so we can't rely on her. Deku's voice broke off and he swiped at his eyes. I can't lose you guys. And this is the best plan I can think of. The tears were running full force now, along with Deku's dripping nose. He clenched his fists and grit his teeth, trying to hold back the tears. Toshi! His voice cracked, and he leaned towards his brother. Stone face breaking, Toshi crouched down, pulling Deku into a hug. Deku buried his face into Toshi's neck, clinging to his shirt. I'm sorry, Toshi. I tried. I really did try to get away. I promise. Deku said, his sobs making his words stutter. Toshi opened his mouth, he needed to say something, but no words seemed readily available. He pulled Deku closer, squeezing the small boy in his arms. We'll be able to stay together and we'll be surrounded by heroes. Overhaul would have to be insane to try and attack. And, if Ei's quirk goes haywire again, Eraserhead can erase it. Toshi said nothing and Deku continued. I'll work on contingency plans. We can make this work. Toshi sighed, and closed his eyes, breathing deeply through his nose. He stood there for several minutes, just hugging Deku. Finally, he gave Deku one final tight squeeze before pulling away. Fine. Deku squeaked, looking up at Toshi. Really? Yes. Just promise me one thing. What? Toshi's voice lowered to a whisper. If I say we need to leave and get out of this, we leave. Deku nodded. Okay, Toshi. Toshi let go of Deku and took a step back. Shooting Eraserhead one final glare, he dropped his control. Life returned to Eraserhead's previously blank eyes as control returned. Straightening up, he flexed his fingers, enjoying the ability to move once again. Are you done? He asked, giving Toshi an exhausted look. Toshi smirked, stuffing his hands in his pockets. I don't know, are you going to fall for it again? Aizawa glared but ignored the jab. Where's Eri? Toshi stiffened, his smile slipping off his face. Deku stepped in trying to avoid a fight. He could tell Toshi didn't like Eraserhead saying her name. Forcing extra enthusiasm into his voice, he asked, Yeah, Toshi, where is she? Toshi's glare softened and he grabbed Deku's shoulder. She's this way, he said, pushing Deku forward. Walking farther into the maze of boxes, Toshi led the way, with Deku in the middle, and Aizawa taking up the rear. Is she okay? Deku asked, trotting to keep up with Toshi's quick pace. She's all right. But she'll be relieved to see you. She's been worried. Then in a quieter voice, he tacked on, I've been worried too. Deku smiled sadly and squeezed Toshi's hand. It'll be okay, he whispered. You really promise you're okay? Yeah. I'm okay. Toshi gave a half-hearted smile and held up a hand, stopping in front of a specific box tower. Hey, he called, it's me. You're safe to come out now. Quiet scuffles came from behind a box as Eri shoved it aside and her small head poked out. Toshi held out a hand. It's all right. You can come out. Biting her lip, Eri crept out, hiding behind Toshi. Hey! Deku asked. Eri's face lit up, and she gasped, sprinting into Deku's arms. Deku oofed at the impact, knocked back a step but hugged her tightly. Deku, she whimpered. Deku's eyes began watering. It's all right, Eri. I've missed you too. Pulling away, the girl's hands ran all over his face. You're okay, right? He didn't hurt you. Deku gave a big thumbs up. I'm all good. He winked at her. He's too slow to catch me. Aizawa snorted from behind, and Eri froze, cowering behind Deku. It's okay, Deku said, rubbing her arms. You don't have to be scared. Eraserhead got down on one knee, broadcasting every movement. His voice was soft, as though coaxing a spooked animal. It's okay, he said, I'm here to help. I'm a hero. And we've met before when you were sick. Eri turned to Deku, her eyes wide. He's the one that turned my quirk off. Deku smiled, yep. And he's letting us stay with him and some other heroes for a little bit. They're going to keep Overhaul away. Eri frowned, but Toshi was quick to step in and reassure her, and we'll be staying all together. Right, Eraserhead? He said with a glare. Aizawa nodded, yes. You three won't be separated. Are you okay with that, Eri? Deku asked. Eri bit her lip, looking down in thought, before giving a hesitant nod. Great. We're all set then, Eraser. Eraserhead blinked but stood back up. Then let's go. Walking swiftly, the hero was quick in hurrying them back to the car. Present MIC sat in the front seat, hopping out as they approached and opening a car door. Hey, they're listeners. Hop on in. Deku immediately got in, struggling a little due to his lack of height. Scooting over to the far side, he made room for Toshi and Eri. Aizawa got in last, checking the area one last time to make sure no one had seen them, and slammed the door shut. Let's go, he said. MIC flashed a huge smile. All right. Buckle up, boys and girls, we're hitting the road. Snapping their seatbelts in, Toshi leaned over to help Eri with hers. His arm rested over her shoulders, his hand resting on Deku. Reaching up, Deku took Toshi's hand and squeezed it as they started driving away. It'll be okay, he mowed, smiling. Toshi gave a pained smile and looked away longingly at the warehouse as they pulled away. What do you want, Eraserhead? Deku asked, fiddling with the infirmary sheets. Eraserhead leaned forward. I want to give you a home. I want to keep you safe so that Overhaul can never hurt you or Toshi or Eri ever again. But why? People don't care. About people like us. People like us? Deku blushed but didn't answer. Forgotten people. Deku's head whipped up. People who are ignored because of their quirks or their parents or the way they look. The outsiders and outcasts that have to fend for themselves. Those people? Deku nodded, his eyes watering now, but Eraserhead pushed forward. I want to help because no one should be forgotten. Deku sniffled and a softer tone crept into Aizawa's voice. That's why you helped them? Isn't it? Eyes swimming and lip wobbling, Deku nodded. Then swiping his eyes, he fixed Eraserhead with the fiercest glare he could manage. You promise? You promise you won't let them get hurt? Eraserhead took a deep breath. I promise. Bakugo rolled his shoulders, irritated by the way his hero costume was clinging to his skin. His hero costume was obviously the best, but he was ready to peel it off and get clean. He had a perfect quirk for heroics, one he wouldn't trade for anything else. But since his quirk relied so much on his explosive sweat, his body was built to produce a lot. More sweat meant bigger explosions. But now, after a long heroics class, it left him feeling gross. The sweat on his forehead had dried, leaving behind salts crystals that burned his eyes. He was ready to get clean. If only these extras weren't so slow. They were ambling and giggling and chattering, each taking their time as they wandered back. A vein in his forehead pulsed in irritation as the class slowed down more, trickling to a hesitant stop. Bakugo ground his teeth. Why were his classmates so stupid? How hard was it to walk to the dressing room? Bakugo growled. He was sick of being surrounded by these idiots. He just wanted to change, he didn't have time for their stupidity. Shoving past his classmates, he ignored their complaints and grumbles. One of them, Grapehead, whined and cried as he stomped past, but he felt no sympathy. The trash had been using the pause as an opportunity to slide closer to Ponytail. If the pervert got knocked to the ground as Bakugo pushed forward, who cared? The trash deserved it. Shoving Dunceface away, Bakugo finally got clear of his classmates. It was a kid who had been holding them up, stopping him from being able to get cleaned up. A boy that Bakugo recognized. The idiot had been gone for years now, but he recognized that face. The round cheeks, bright hopeful eyes, and messy hair. His jaw dropped and the words spilled out. Wait. Deku! Deku, if that was him, also seemed startled, stumbling back and rubbing his arm. Just like in primary school, when the nerd got between him and some extra who had been badmouthing him. But it couldn't be. The nerd had been gone for 8 years now. They had been friends when they were younger. Deku had actually been his first friend and only friend for a long time. Everyone else was extra, floaters, who would end up in the background of his successful life. But Deku, at least in the beginning, had been different. Of course, back then he wasn't Deku, he was Izuku. Their moms had been friends, who had met in college or at some job years ago, he couldn't bother to remember. They had stayed close over the years, and when they both had 2 little boys, they got closer. Auntie Inko and Deku became staples at his house. While his mom and auntie talked, he and Izuku would play. They spent hours together. Sometimes playing with blocks, or watching some cartoon. But more often than not they played their favorite game, Heroes. Bakugo was determined to become the strongest hero ever, to surpass even All Might. And in his young mind, Izuku was destined to be his one and only sidekick. But they didn't bother waiting to get quirks and grow up to start their agency, they started it now. A couple of minutes from their homes, in a small forest, the Super King Might Hero Agency first came to be. They spent hours in the woods battling trees and jumping off boulders, always saving the day. Their actual agency was an old gnarled black pine tree in the middle of a grove. They'd climb the branches to the very top where they'd look out and survey the city. Meeting would be held, munching on snacks, and hanging from the top branches. But whenever trouble came, the 2 heroes would leap down and save the day. Izuku's hero name was always something All Might related, like All Might Jr. or Mighty Boy. He'd grin like an idiot, dressed up in his All Might hoodie, and try to mimic All Might's iconic laugh and voice. Bakugo wanted his hero name to be something strong and powerful like King Explosion. But Deku had said it should be Kaken. It was one of the cheekiest things the little nerd ever said to him. Katsuki's name in hiragana could be read as Explosion. And if you took that part of the name and tacked on Chan as the honorific, it became Kaken or Little Explosion. He almost killed the nerd over the name. But part of him secretly liked it. Plus the bright smile that Izuku had on his face when he said it made it hard to be too angry about it. The old hag had freaked out when she first heard the name, gushing over how cute it was. Izuku had beamed, and from then on, Katsuki was Kaken. Things had been good. And then Bakugo got his quirk and things got better. Explosion. The ability to secrete nitroglycerine and explode it on command. It was only little pops and crackles at first, but it was obvious Bakugo would be a force to be reckoned with. But Izuku, the one who was supposed to be his one and only sidekick, was quirkless. He could never be a hero. And so Bakugo started hanging out with other kids, ones who had quirks. Izuku kept tagging along, wanting to play heroes or go to their agency in the woods. But he had started getting annoying. Izuku was always crying and following him around, and because he had no quirk, he was useless to him. Izuku became Deku, and they parted ways. Bakugo continued towards greatness and Deku continued to be useless. Deku's father left him and Auntie, disgusted by his son's lack of a quirk. Bakugo watched Deku try to hold back tears at school. Watched how Auntie struggled to make ends meet for her and Deku. Eventually, things got bad enough that the Midoriyas moved in with the Bakugas. At least until Auntie could find a better job and an apartment she could afford. But Bakugo became a bully to Deku. He didn't recognize his actions as that back then, but he knew better now. He pushed him, burned him, mocked him. The nerd would cry but wouldn't back down. He kept getting back up over and over again, only for Bakugo to burn him over and over again. Deku became his punching bag for whenever he felt angry or upset about something. Then one day, he was a little too careless. He hadn't realized how strong his quirk had gotten, and in a fit of anger, he burnt Deku. It had been bad. Even now he could close his eyes and see Deku on the ground clutching his arm, screaming and crying. He could still hear the wailing of the ambulance in his ears, and Auntie sobbing hysterically. Bakugo became obsessed with his quirk control after that, but the damage was done. Auntie and Deku moved out, and the Bakugas didn't hear any news from them for 5 years. When they did, it was a somber phone call, informing them that Inko Midoriya was dead. She had passed away earlier that day from pneumonia. A simple funeral was arranged, and Auntie was laid to rest. But there was no word of Deku. No information that his parents could find. He figured he'd died. So this kid. This Deku imposter that was staring at him. It couldn't be his Deku. The Deku he had burned and hurt until he had driven him away for good. This wasn't him. Even if he had his wide green eyes, bright smile. And then the kid opened his mouth and Bakugo's world screeched to a halt. Kaken, the not Deku asked. Bakugo reared back. How did this kid know that name? And that voice? It was like he was 5 again, the little nerd trailing behind him as they marched through the woods. He wasn't scared of anything, but if he was, this kid would make the top of the list. It couldn't be. But this was Deku. Deku beamed at him. Bakugo stared blindly. Was Deku's smile always this bright? This smile that made him feel like the strongest and most important person in the world? He didn't remember it ever being like that. Deku continued, oblivious to his internal panic. He started rambling, his eyes lit up with the fervor they did when he talked about heroes. His enthusiasm felt like a wave crashing over him, drowning him. He couldn't breathe. And so he did the next best thing. He swore. Deku jumped as if Bakugo had detonated one of his strongest explosions. His face fell, and he clutched himself. He was scared. Bakugo froze. He did that. He scared him. He was doing it all over again. His stupid teacher jumped in then, scolding Deku and wrapping him up in his capture weapon. The kid blubbered, tears falling freely. He always was a cry. Baby. And then his teacher was swearing and Deku had wiggled out of the bindings. Bakugo didn't move, he watched as Deku hightailed it out of there. Mr. Aizawa yelled into his phone for a couple of minutes, and then disappeared. Another teacher came to babysit them, ushering them to their classroom. Deku didn't return and neither did Mr. Aizawa. All the while Bakugo sat and stewed and remembered. He didn't know what was going on. But he would get to the bottom of this. Trust was not something that came easy to Shinso Hitoshi. People were too fickle, saying one thing but then doing another. People cared only for themselves, and not anyone else. And especially not villainous people like Shinso who didn't fit their worldview. You couldn't trust. You couldn't let others in. And you were all on your own. These were all lessons Shinso Hitoshi was forced to learn early on in life. Surrendered to the foster system by parents who couldn't, or wouldn't, take care of him, he bounced around from place to place, from person to person. He was unwanted. He could hear people's whispers when he was asleep or when they thought he wasn't listening. Just look at him, they'd hiss. Wild hair, dark eyes, and a permanent scowl. Who would want that? Look at his quirk, another would say. Brainwash. He'll take control of you, make you do things. He's a villain waiting to happen, you can't trust him. You can't trust him. It didn't seem to matter who it was, or where they were in life, whether guardian, child, classmates, teacher. All ran away. You couldn't trust a villain. And he couldn't trust them. It had been the pattern that had repeated all his life. And a pattern Shinso assumed would continue when he was moved to Mutasfu. He had been 12, and it had been his third move that year. Not that there was much of a difference. A crappy school, a cramped group home, and him, all alone. And then he met Deku. He was in a tunnel, back up against the wall, as the school's brightest and best bullies taught him a lesson. Reminding him that they, the future heroes and leaders of this great society, wouldn't accept him. Shinso stared blankly at them. There wasn't anything to say. He had heard this speech time and time again. He understood. He'd stay out of their way, but he'd also appreciate it if they stayed out of his. The bullies hadn't been too pleased with that. You need to learn your place, one growled darkly. In the trash, yes I know, Shinso said. That hadn't made them any happier. Shinso's arms were grabbed and pinned, his head slammed against the wall by his hair, making his ears ring. He drooped as he watched the leader stalk forward, eyes glinting. Closing his eyes, Shinso resigned himself to his fate. He was going to get hurt as he had before and as he would again. There was nothing to do. Hey! Someone yelled. Shinso's eyes flickered open. Standing at the entrance of the tunnel was a green-haired boy looking right at Shinso. Small and dirty, he was. Clasping an alley cat to his chest and looking like he crawled out of a dumpster. The bully stopped, choosing to turn and glare at the interrupter. What do you wa-? And the boy screamed. Oh, thank goodness you found him, he cried. Rushing forward he ran to Shinso, pushing the bullies out of the way. Despite the cat in his arms and Shinso's permanent scowl, the boy opened his arms and hugged him. You're safe. I've been so worried, the boy said, his eyes watering. I've been running around for hours looking for you and I hadn't been able to find you anywhere and I was so worried and it was getting late and I thought you had gotten hurt. Shinso could feel his mouth beginning to drop. What was going on? Evidently, the bullies felt the same, the ringleader grabbing the boy's shoulder to give him a talking to. But the boy let go of Shinso and burst into tears, snot dribbling and eyes swelling. Everyone stepped back, uncomfortable by the boy who had started bawling. Thank you for finding him and keeping him safe. I don't know what I would have done if he was hurt, he sniffled between sobs. His cries grew louder, but from behind his back, his hand snuck out and grabbed Shinso's arm. The bullies' mouths flapped open, baffled by the crying boy who was still holding on to Shinso. Thank you. Thank you, the boy cried over and over again, before shoving the matted alley cat into the lead bully's arms. The cat yowled at the change and lashed out, scratching the boy's face and drawing blood. The leader screamed, swatting at the cat, fur flying. In the commotion the boy whispered, "Run," and took off, dragging Shinso behind him as he ran. Ducking down side streets, and weaving through traffic, the boy led Shinso away from the bullies and the cat still wreaking havoc. Shinso's mind spun at how many turns they took, and how many streets they ran down. It was overwhelming. They ran until Shinso thought his lungs might explode, before stopping in a grove of trees in a nearby park. Shinso panted, hands on his knees, trying to regain whatever breath he could. His green-haired rescuer laughed, also trying to catch his breath. Sorry about jumping in like that. It probably confused you, he said. But it didn't look like a good situation. Shinso stared, completely lost as to what was going on. A small boy, that was maybe his age, had gotten him out of a beating by crying and throwing a cat at his bullies. That same boy had then dragged him across the city until he almost coughed up a lung. What was he supposed to think? Or do? And the boy was still standing there, smiling nervously. "You okay?" the boy asked. Shinso stood up, his lungs finally not feeling like they were about to explode. "I'm fine." "Oh, okay." The boy rubbed his neck. I'm Deku, by the way." They stood there for a minute in awkward silence, staring at the ground. Shinso wondered if all social interaction was this uncomfortable. Was Shinso really that socially incompetent, or was he just a JRK? Thankfully, Deku spoke. What's your name?" He was a JRK. "Shinso." Deku smiled again. "Oh. Well, it's nice to meet you, Shinso." Shinso stared at the light that radiated off of Deku. It was as if a beam of sunlight had been made human and was now smiling at him. Now he really didn't know what to say. Uncomfortable, Deku kicked at the ground and began walking away. "I should probably get going." He smiled one last nervous grin. "Hopefully I'll see you around." Hopefully, Shinso said to himself. Shinso next saw Deku a couple of weeks later. He had been walking home from school, backpack hanging off one arm, when the boy had bounced up to him. "Hi, Shinso." Shinso startled, having not noticed the bright-eyed kid pop up beside him. Deku grinned, skipping by Shinso's side. "I'm so happy to see you again. How are you?" When Shinso didn't immediately respond, Deku's face fell. "Oh, you probably don't remember me." His fingers twisted his dirty t-shirt. "We met a couple of weeks ago." "I know who you are," Shinso said. It was hard to forget the kid that broke up a fight by crying and throwing a cat. Deku's face lit up again and Shinso stared. Why was this boy so happy? "What do you want?" "Oh, nothing," Deku said, bouncing alongside. "I just saw you and thought I would say hi." "So hi," he said with a little half-wave. "Hi." And Deku ran off. Shinso started seeing Deku every couple of days. Sometimes when coming home from school or going to the store. Deku would greet him, ask him how he was, all with an enormous smile. Shinso would grunt a single-word response and Deku would nod before going off on a happy tangent. Usually about something that had happened to him or a hero he had seen. After exhausting all the words that were built up in him, Deku would wave and bounce away. And Shinso would be alone until he ran into Deku again. Shinso didn't say much at first, choosing to stare at this sunshine incarnate. When he did speak, it was usually only single-word responses, but Deku didn't give up. He kept saying hi, chattering and smiling. One time Deku bounced up, a Watame in hand. It was All Might themed and Shinso had glared hungrily at the red, white, and blue cotton candy. "Do you want some?" Deku asked, holding the bag up. "Yes. Thank you." Another time Deku showed up, an angry matted street cat in his arms. "This is Fluffus." The cat turned to look at Shinso, its scarred face and chipped fangs looking anything but fluffy. "He used to be called BSD, but I thought that name was kinda mean." Fluffus nuzzled Deku, smooching its face into Deku's neck. Shinso hummed and Fluffus turned, its fur rising as it glared at Shinso. "He looks more like a BSTD." "Shinso!" Deku cried, snuggling the cat. "Don't say such hurtful things. Fluffus attacked your bullies." Shinso swore. The cat smirked at him as its tail flicked in the air. "Ah. My apologies. Thank you, Fluffus." It took months of these conversations for Shinso to realize that Deku was going to keep popping up. He was going to keep talking to him. It took even longer for him to realize that he looked forward to his conversations with Deku. He wore him down. Shinso began talking about his past. He shared about his experiences in the foster system and all the places he'd been. He complained about the bullies that refused to leave him alone, and how frustrating it was. Deku was sympathetic but never pitying. He understood. It was nice, being understood. And nothing Shinso shared pushed Deku away. When he opened up about his quirk, brainwash, Deku's eyes had lit up, and the boy spiraled into one of his mumble storms. He hadn't backed away, hadn't acted scared at all. Eyes shining, he moved closer to Shinso, asking about every aspect of brainwash and how it functioned. When his questions had been adequately answered, Deku clapped in hands together. "Your quirk is amazing, Shinso," he said. "It would be so good for heroics." Shinsu's mouth dropped and his eyes widened. "What?" he asked, swallowing harshly. "What do you mean?" Deku blinked and titled his head to the side. "Oh, it's just a really good quirk, that's all. You could stop crimes before they happen, break up hostage situations." His voice took on a reverent tone. "It's an amazing quirk. You don't think it's villainous?" Shinso asked, voice hoarse. Deku's face fell. "No, I don't think so." His voice turned wistful. "I'd like to think quirks don't define who a person is." He stared off into the distance. "I don't have a quirk. And I've been told all my life I'm useless for it. I'd like to think that isn't true." Shinso studied Deku. The thought that the boy was quirkless had never even crossed his mind. Deku was brilliant and clever and kind and funny, quirk or no quirk. "I don't think you're useless," he finally said. Deku turned, eyes shining with his ever-present tears. "Thanks, Shinso." "Hitoshi." Deku blinked. "What?" "That's my first name, Hitoshi. You can call me by that, or Toshi." Deku smiled shyly. "Thanks. It's nice to meet you, Toshi." Shinso rolled his eyes but smiled too. "Nice to meet you too, Deku." Thinking back on it, Shinso was even more grateful that Deku had stuck around. For the first time, he had someone he could call a friend, someone he could maybe trust. It was nice. But nothing ever stays the same forever. For Shinso, change came in the form of a woman in a crisp-pressed suit. With her eyes blank and voice monotone, the women informed Shinso that he would be moving group homes. This time to a different city. Furious Shinso stomped away, slamming the door to the bedroom he and 5 other kids slept in. Hands clenched into fists, he glared at the floor and decided that for once he wasn't doing it. He wasn't moving again. He had never run away. But he was tired of being uprooted. And so that night, school backpack slung over his shoulder, and shoes in hand to muffle his footsteps, he snuck out. He left the group home to try the streets. Although he quickly learned that being homeless was harder than he thought it would be. Finding a place to sleep was difficult, and there was little to eat. The other homeless were highly territorial and defensive of what they considered theirs. Being new to this life, Shinso quickly found himself beat up and in trouble. And that was what he was like when Deku found him. He was curled up in a ball, huddled beside a dumpster, nursing his black eye and bloody knuckles. Desperate for food, he had gone digging in a dumpster he shouldn't have, and now he paid the price. Gingerly he pressed against his eye, feeling how the skin was swelling up. He wouldn't be able to see out of it soon. Shivering, he snuggled further against the dumpster, watching the sun disappear. It would be dark soon and he would be stuck out in the cold. Closing his eyes, he curled into himself. He was tired, so tired. "Hey, Toshi! What are you doing?" Shinso's eyes snapped open. Deku leaned over him in an oversized hoodie, a concerned frown tugging at his lips. He knew Deku was homeless. It was easy to figure that out. The kid had one outfit that never changed, and he had caught Deku digging around in the trash. But in the 2 weeks he'd been living on the streets, he hadn't seen the boy once. Deku leaned closer. "You shouldn't be out here." Shinso shrugged. "Nowhere else to go. I left the group home." Deku's eyebrows pinched together, his face furrowed in thought. Nodding to himself, he reached forward and snagged Shinso's arm. "Come with me," he ordered, pulling Shinso to his feet. "You can stay with me," he added, shooting Shinso a small smile. But Shinso hesitated. Deku stepped closer, head craning to deal with the height difference. "It'll be okay," he said. "Trust me." Shinso looked at Deku, the boy that had burst into his life with tears and a cat. The boy that didn't judge him based on his quirk, and didn't give up on him. The boy who was asking him to trust him. And at that moment Shinso realized he did. He trusted Deku. And with a slight nod, he consented, letting Deku drag him away. Steam curled up from the pot, filling the kitchen with the smell of bubbling miso soup. Aizawa stirred lazily, occasionally sipping from his cup of coffee. In the background, he could hear the sound of rain pattering on the roof and the rice cooker was ticking away. It would be ready soon. Setting the spoon down on the counter, Aizawa reached up into his cabinets and pulled out whatever bowls or plates he could find. He wasn't used to having to feed anyone other than himself. Usually, he subsisted on jelly packets alone, but that wasn't healthy for the 3 kids asleep in his bed. Most of his lifestyle wasn't healthy for children. And he hadn't realized how bare his apartment was until they got home. Deku had winced, Toshi had smirked, and had Ei stared blindly. She at least didn't seem to know what normal was. Because the living room consisting of an old threadbare couch and rickety wooden coffee table, and nothing else wasn't normal. Well, it was normal for him. He had slunk deeper into his scarf and tried to play it off, but he could see that even MIC was unimpressed. Well, sue him. He had lived on his own for over a decade now, and he didn't need much. But with kids now staying with him, even if it was only temporary, he would have to make some changes. But he was trying to be flexible and open. Things that didn't come easy to him. He had explained the plan for the kids. To get cleaned up, eat, sleep, and tomorrow go to UA to figure out their schooling. The kids didn't really trust him, but no one was hurt and they hadn't tried to run away, so Aizawa was counting it as a win. Sighing, he pinched his nose. He didn't know what he was doing. Morning, show, a voice cried enthusiastically. Looking up, Aizawa saw MIC walk into his apartment, kicking off his shoes, before sauntering over to the kitchen. The hero was sopping wet from the storm, but MIC was already ready for the day, his hair slicked back, and his orange shades on. Only the directional speaker remained off. The support staff had done their best, but the speaker was still a nightmare to lug around. Aizawa was surprised MIC could even move his neck with the thing on. MIC grinned and leaned close to Aizawa. "How are the little listeners this morning?" "They're not up yet." MIC gasped and glanced at the clock. "You know we got to be at UA in an hour, and with traffic, that means we've got to leave soon." "We?" MIC pouted. "Yes, we. I'm here to help." Aizawa raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "I brought the clothes Nemurai found, and I can help make breakfast while you wake the kiddos up." Aizawa glanced at the pot of bubbling soup. MIC's help might be needed. MIC grinned, taking Aizawa's silence as a confirmation and bumped him out of the way. "Go wake the little listeners up." He brandished the spoon. "I've got this." Grunting, Aizawa walked away, leaving MIC whistling cheerfully in the kitchen. How that man managed to be so lively at this time in the morning, he did not know. Stopping by the door, he grabbed the garbage bag full of clothes Midnight had collected. The heroine had run around the apartment complex and managed to gather children's clothes of various sizes. Eventually, they would have to take the kids shopping, but the clothes would help them make do until then. Stopping by his bedroom door, he gave it rap and waited a minute before pushing it open. The kids were snuggled up in a heap in his bed. Eri smooshed in the middle, her arms wrapped around Deku, snuggling into him. Deku's arm was thrown casually around her, reaching over to rest on Toshi. The two were entirely at peace, their breaths even and steady. However, the purple-haired brat, Toshi, was already up. Back resting against the wall arms, resting protectively on Eri and Deku as he stared Aizawa down. The boy didn't seem to have slept a wink. The circles under his eyes had become more pronounced, and his eyes were red and exhausted. Aizawa grit his teeth. Please tell him this child did not stay up all night. He had been camped out in the living room, snoozing in his yellow sleeping bag, but he hadn't heard anything. But he could see it. The purple-haired boy, awake and watching over his siblings, body tense and ready for any noise, any movement that said danger. Aizawa bit back a groan. This kid was going to be hard. Toshi raised an eyebrow, silently questioning Aizawa's existence. Aizawa hoisted the bag of clothes up. "These are clothes. No clue if they'll work, but they're all we've got." Toshi nodded, watching as Aizawa set the clothes on the ground. "We need to leave for UA in 30 minutes. Wake them up and get ready. You've got full use of the bathroom if you need it. There's breakfast as well." Toshi nodded, eyes still trained on Aizawa. He sighed, "I'll leave you to it then." Closing the door behind him, he paused. Inside his bedroom, he could hear the sound of rustling sheets, of muffled yawns, and murmuring voices. Good, he thought. Mic was still in the kitchen, whistling to himself as he dished up the rice and miso soup. "You know, Sho, you really need to buy some more dishes. I had to use several mugs since you don't have enough bowls." Aizawa nodded and picked his coffee mug back up, walking back to the living room to collect his papers. "Were the kids all right?" Mic asked, eating his own cup of rice and miso soup. "They are fine," Aizawa said. "They were all curled up together, so sharing my bed wasn't a problem." Mic hummed. Last night had been a bit painful. Bringing the kids back to his apartment, it became apparent that he had very little. No clothes, no furniture, and no bed. Sure, there was the spare bedroom the kids could use. But he had been using that for storage, and his cats had claimed the space as their own. Now, he was going to have to clean it up and take it back from the cats. Get a couple of beds in there, and try to make his apartment more kid-friendly. His head was already pounding just thinking about it. Collapsing onto the couch, he stared at the wall as he drank his coffee. There was so much to do. So much to think about. He closed his eyes. He was just going to sit here for a couple of minutes and ignore the mess his life had become. Ignore the gushing of water in the bathroom, the sound of clinking silverware, ignore even Mic chatting happily in the background. Just be. For 5 minutes. Shinso leaned against the counter, glaring at Eraser. The hero had been passed out on the couch ever since he, Deku, and Eri emerged from the bedroom. Present Mic, who apparently was Eraserhead's friend, how that worked he didn't know, greeted them cheerfully in the kitchen. Grinning, he shoved a coffee mug of miso soup and rice into their hands. It was good, Shinso admitted reluctantly. Even Eri had a small smile on her face as she sipped the soup. She deserved better. Shinso thought, a simple breakfast like miso soup should be commonplace to her. Not a treat. She deserved so much better. Better and more consistent food, a warm home, and not having to worry about a murderous crime lord trying to hunt her down. But that's what this was about, wasn't it? That's why they were with the heroes. So that they could get overhaul off their backs, and keep Eri safe. He shoved another spoonful into his mouth. Although, the pro-hero laying slumped on the couch was doing little to make him feel like they were in safe hands. Figures. Soon enough, everyone was ready to go, and present Mic was shaking Eraserhead awake. The hero blinked blearily but grabbed his scarf and bag. A grunted, "Let's go," and they were out the door. They had to run quickly. The darkened sky was dumping rain by the buckets, but they managed to make it to the car without getting too wet. Present Mic was driving again. It was the same car that had taken them away from their hideout the night before. The radio was on, and the hero was tapping his finger against the steering wheel, occasionally giving some factoid about the singer. Or asking if he should play some song on his show. Eraserhead, for the most part, just sat there, grunting an answer or saying nothing at all. Present Mic seemed okay with that, content to just talk about whatever came to mind. Sort of like him and Deku. Shaking the thought from his head, he turned to see Deku give him an encouraging smile. "I'll be okay," he mowed. Shinso glanced away, watching the cars drive by, splashing through rain puddles. He hoped so. UA was enormous. He had always dreamed of going here, but now he didn't know. It was so pretentious. An enormous H-shaped building, a gate that required individual cards to get in, entire cityscapes to blow up and fight in. So much money, so much show. He slouched lower, following Eraserhead. The school was rather empty. A student could be spotted in their uniform here and there, walking to their classes, a bit wet from the rain. One student was even brave enough to greet Eraserhead. A blue-haired boy with a rigid posture called out a good morning and asking if he would be with their class that morning. Eraserhead grunted an answer and shooed the boy along. But not before the boy glanced at their little party, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Finally, they had arrived at wherever Eraserhead was taking them. Knocking on a surprisingly simple door, at least by UA standards, he walked in. It was a simple office, with an oak desk, some chairs, and a full-wall window outlooking the waterlogged campus and grounds. "Welcome," a squeaky voice cried. Shinso's eyes widened as Principal Nezu walked towards them, grinning wildly. He had always known the principal of UA was a quirked animal, but it was so much different in person. The crisp three-part suit did nothing to hide the sleek white fur, square ears, or beady black eyes. Nezu was no human. That's right, I'm the principal. Shinso froze. Did he say that out loud? But Principal Nezu was paying no attention to him, his paw reaching out to shake Eri's hand. Shinso stiffened, wary, but the principal was gentle, moving slow and speaking with an unusual amount of tenderness. Hesitantly Eri accepted his paw, shaking it. It's wonderful to meet you, Eri. Eri bit her lip and nodded shyly. Releasing her hand, Nezu turned to Deku and then him, greeting them both. I'm delighted to have you here today. Since you will be staying with Aizawa for the foreseeable future, it would be amiss of us to not ensure that you receive the proper schooling. That being said, we do need to know where your current levels lie. Walked over to his desk, picking up 3 separate stacks of paper. Each of these tests has been written by me with each of you in mind. They should give us a good understanding of where you are at. Handed the stack to each along with a paper. You are free to take as long as you need. Eraser and MIC do need to go teach their classes, but Eraser should come back around lunchtime. If that's all right. Shinso scowled. He wanted to object, but there was nothing he could complain about. Nezu, sir. Deku interrupted, raising his hand. Doesn't know how to read very well, and well, this is a big test. Nezu smiled. Not to worry. I will be helping Eri with her test personally. Now take a seat, he said, ushering them to a chair. I'll be back later, Aizawa said, the door shutting behind him. Shinso sunk into his chair. The hero could stay away forever for all he cared. The test itself wasn't too bad, Shinso thought as he plugged away at it. It was hard but doable. A lot of things he didn't know, but still quite a bit he did. However, there were a surprising number of questions covering heroes and quirk laws. Shinso frowned and marked another answer. It was odd. Deku also looked troubled, nervous mutterings pushing their way out of his lips. Nothing understandable, Deku was speaking way too fast. But every so often, he caught Nezu watching Deku, his ears twitching. Shinso's eyes narrowed. What was the rat up to? Deku glanced over his test one final time and set it down, thunder crackling ominously as he did so. He was nervous, about the test, about Nezu, and especially about his fake quirk. He had claimed to have an intelligence quirk to keep them off his back and keep Eri safe, but he didn't know how to keep that facade up. Or how well he should do on the test. A lot of the questions were advanced, including analysis and quirk lore. Even if he had an intelligence quirk, he looked like he was a 6-year-old. How smart were most 6-year-olds? He tried to judge it based on Eri, but even that wasn't great. She wasn't a great model, her education had suffered during her time with Overhaul. He glanced around, Eri and Toshi were both still working on their tests. Nezu looked up and smiled. Deku glanced away, choosing to stare out the windows at the falling rain. But he couldn't help but feel that he messed up somehow. Eventually, after what felt like hours, both Eri and Toshi had finished their tests. Excellent, Nezu crowed. He checked his watch. That took less time than I thought. We should still have enough time before lunch to get your checkups in. Checkup? Toshi asked. Nezu paused, choosing his words carefully. We want to make sure you each are healthy. Recovery girl is on site and can do a simple checkup. You can all be together and if anything is too intrusive say so and we will stop. We want you to feel safe. Nezu turned to look at each of them. Is that okay? Deku bit his lip. I'm okay with it for me, but I don't know about the others. Toshi's face was stony. You'll stop the second we ask. Nezu nodded. Of course. His eyes turned sharp and dangerous. I know what it's like to be at the mercy of others. The moment you say stop, we'll stop. Toshi nodded. Fine. Deku asked. Eri's eyes were wide, and she scooted closer to Deku. But she hesitantly nodded her head. Thank you, Nezu said. Reaching across his desk, he pressed a button, and a minute later, Recovery Girl walked in. Deku gave a small sigh in relief when he saw the heroine without her syringe cane and lab coat. This would be uncomfortable enough for Eri without extra reminders of overhaul. And the last thing they needed was another quirk meltdown. Recovery Girl walked over to them, setting her bag down. "I'll be doing the examinations in here," she said. "I figured this would be more comfortable." They all nodded and sat down on the couch, hands winding towards each other. Recovery Girl was professional but gentle, explaining everything that she was doing. Heart rate, weight, blood pressure. Each measurement and test was done on Toshi and Deku first before moving to Eri. During each test, Eri would glance over at them, her hands sneaking over and gripping tightly. Deku did his best to smile, to show that everything was okay. But it was slightly forced. Deku hadn't had the best memories associated with doctors, from his quirk appointment, to ER with burns, to his mom's death. He had to fight to keep a smile on his face. He couldn't have Eri nervous. Thankfully it was over soon enough, Recovery Girl packing up her bag and checking over her clipboard with notes. The three of them breathed a sigh of relief that did not go unnoticed by Nezu or Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl smiled, her wrinkles pronounced. "Looking at your measurements, it appears that the three of you are all in surprisingly healthy condition for having been homeless. You all three could use some extra weight, but that's easily fixed. I'll draft a meal plan for Eraserhead to help with it." Nezu walked over and motioned for Recovery Girl's clipboard. "Excellent," he said, flipping through the pages. His paws stopped on one, and he leaned closer as he read. "Interesting," he murmured. "Deku," he asked, looking up. "How old did you say you were again?" Deku's palms itched, and he struggled to keep his voice steady. "I'm 6. Recovery Girl frowned. "Really?" She plucked the clipboard from Nezu's paws. "That is worrying," she said. "Your measurements align more with 4 or 5 years old. I would have thought Eri was older than you." Toshi grimaced, and Deku blanched. "For all 5?" he asked. "Yes," Recovery Girl said, frowning. "Oh," said Deku, staring at the ground. "I guess I'm just small for my age." Clenching his teeth, he tried to fight back the tears. It was just 1 year, he thought. He had thought he was 6, but he was actually 5. It was okay. It wasn't going to make that much a difference in the big run. He just needed to pull it together. From the corner of his eye, he could see Eri's eyes shining and her hands drifting up to her horn. No, Deku thought. He couldn't let her feel guilty about this. "It's fine," Deku said suddenly, trying to infuse as much cheerfulness as he could into his voice. "I can't really remember my birthday, so I probably just got it wrong. 5 sounds right." Recovery Girl frowned and Deku struggled to keep up his cheerful attitude. He couldn't let them know, he couldn't let Eri get in trouble. Nezu hummed. "I see," he said. Deku shrunk under the scrutiny, folding into himself. "Actually, Chio," Nezu said. "I believe we have forgotten something." The elderly women turned, eyebrows raised. "What?" "You were planning on x-raying Deku's shoulder, I believe." Deku startled, hand coming up to touch his shoulder. "Wait, why? I thought it was okay." Recovery Girl hummed. "Yes, I healed it, but the bullet did hit your shoulder bone. I would like to double-check and make sure the bone has healed correctly." Toshi glared. "You should have been more careful," he said, swatting Deku. Deku bowed his head. "Sorry." "Well, dearie," Recovery Girl said, "nothing we can do about it now. We'll just take the x-ray real quick just to be sure." Nezu checked his watch. "Lunch starts in 10 minutes. That should give you enough time to take the x-ray in the infirmary while we go and get food from Lunch Rush." Recovery Girl nodded, prodding at Deku. "Come on, Deku dear, let's get you looked at." Bakugo stomped along the hallway, hands stuffed in his pockets. His classmates were all chattering, happy that they had been let out early for lunch. But he didn't care. All he could think about was Deku. He had gotten home last night in a daze. Slamming the door open and pushing past the hag yelling at him, he ran up to his room. His chest felt tight as he dug under his bed, looking for an old scrapbook his mom had put together during one of her fads. Ripping the book open, he could feel his chest tighten even more as he found the picture he had been looking for. It was a happy picture from when he was younger. Arms resting over the other's shoulders, Deku and Kaken stood side by side smiling. Bakugu's smile was smug and proud, the king of the world. But Bakugu paid it no attention, his attention solely focused on Deku. The nerd was smiling, his eyes scrunched up from the grin, and his cheeks flushed. It was the same kid he had seen earlier that day at UA, green curls, freckles, and all. His breath caught in his throat, and his eyes stung. It was Deku. The book clattered to the floor as Bakugu's hands clenched into fists. Deku wasn't dead. He had been at his school, had been at UA. But how? Deku didn't look like he'd aged a day, he looked younger even then from when Bakugu last saw him. Was it a quirk, he wondered. But the nerd was quirkless. Or was he? Had Bakugu been wrong all this time? It was the only thing that made sense, though. How else could Deku be 5 again? But if he did have a quirk, then all those times he... Bakugu shook his head, drops falling from his eyes. No, he wasn't going to think about it. He was just going to figure things out first. He'd figure out where Deku had been, and why he was young again. Swallowing, he pushed the guilt back down. He just needed to figure it out. He could still feel the guilt curling up inside him, twisting and turning, squeezing around his lungs and building in his throat. It was making it hard to focus or to even think. Breathing deeply through his nose, he tried to shove it away, to focus on walking to lunch. Up ahead, he could hear one of his classmates, Sparky, dragging his feet, complaining about something. The storm, it just really messes with me. Quirk goes all crazy and hard to control. Sparky sighed, looking out the window at the black sky. It had been raining all morning and didn't show any signs of stopping. One of the other classmates, Red, Bakugu thought, piped up. Why don't you go to Recovery Girl? I'm sure the old lady could help. Sparky shook his head. I can't right now. She's busy. He jerked a finger back in the direction of the infirmary. I heard she's looking at that boy. You know the one from yesterday? I don't want to be a both dash. Baku grabbed Sparky's shirt, yanking him back and spinning him around. Where is he? Bakugu growled. Sparky raised his hands in defense, sparks flying off his fingers. Her office, I'd guess. I didn't go in, it's got a do not disturb sign on it and all. Screw that, Bakugu said and took off down the hallway. Where are you going? Sparky yelled after him. Bakugu's throat hitched, to beat the crap out of a stupid nerd. He ran, letting his anger replace the guilt and sadness that was pooling up. Kaminari ran after him, shouting his name. No dude, you can't, he cried. Bakugu ignored him. The extra's words meant about as much as the thunder rumbling in the sky. It was unimportant. Background noise. Turning the corner, he could see the infirmary up ahead. His heart lifted a little, but Sparky ran in front of him, blocking his way. Get out of the way! Bakuug yelled, trying to shove past the electric boy. No, dude! I'm not going to let you hurt some little kid. He raised his hands defensively, electricity rippling across his skin. Bakugu crouched, hands held out, palms facing upwards, explosions popping out from them. You wanna go, Pikachu? Sparky, to his credit, didn't back down, even though Bakugu could see his dilated eyes and trembling hands. I have no issue beating you. Bakugu continued with a wicked grin. So unless you want to die, get out of my way. He raised his hand, setting off an explosion. Nothing that would hurt, just one that was loud and dramatic, smoke billowing up from his hand. Sparky shrieked, jumping into the air as electricity shot out of him, rippling towards Bakugu. Bakugu rolled out of the way, but Sparky didn't stop, gritting his teeth as electricity surged. His eyes were wide and panicked as his sparks climbed the wall, zapping and cracking as they went. Lights flickered and buzzed, burning brighter and brighter until they shattered, popping in an explosion of glass. From somewhere in the school, they could hear a machine whining, screaming at the excess power. And then it was done. Sparky collapsed on the floor, eyes wide and blank, his mouth open as he drooled on the tile. The occasional spark flying off of him as he giggled at the ground. Farther away, Bakugu could hear yelling and feet pounding as they ran. Sparky giggled again, drooling on the ground, and Bakugu fought the urge to do the same. He messed up.